Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening a file that it creates this massive cognitive dissonance. It's really something else. If you
Hmm.
just look at the raw data, the biography, the academic records, all the community service, it looks like we're profiling a model citizen.
Yeah, totally. Someone you'd want your kid to grow up to be.
Exactly. But then you look at the output, the code, the server logs, the global impact, and suddenly you're looking at the architect of one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises of the digital age.
It is a jarring contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, usually when we analyze a criminal origin story, we're looking for the cracks early
You're
on.
right, the trauma.
Yeah, the trauma, desperation, or, some kind of gradual slide into delinquency.
Right.
But today, we're looking at high-level academia, we're looking at moral philosophy, and a drive to improve the world, at least in his eyes.
We are talking about the Silk Road, but I want to be really clear right off the bat.
What?
We aren't doing the FBI raid today. We're not covering the manhunt or the trial or the life sentence.
No, we're putting a pin in all of that.
We are rewinding the tape all the way back to 2010. We want to understand the spark. How does a 26-year-old physics student, and I mean a literal Boy Scout, on a full scholarship pivot from studying the laws of thermodynamics to building a global black market for narcotics?
And that really is the central question, because the answer isn't just, oh, he wanted to get rich. That came later, and you could argue it was almost a side effect.
Almost an accident.
Right. The real answer is surprisingly intellectual. What we're looking at is a convergence. You have this very specific, very radical political ideology, and it just crashes right into a specific moment in technological history.
Okay, so the sources we have in front of us, they paint this picture of Ross Ulbricht that just doesn't fit the Scarface archetype at all. Not even
Yeah.
close. He's at the University of Texas at Dallas. He's working on a master's in materials science. He isn't street smart. He is profoundly book smart. He's literally publishing academic papers on solar cells.
Right. And he's deeply, deeply embedded in the scientific method. That mindset is absolutely crucial to understanding what he eventually built.
How so?
Well, scientists look at systems. They look for inefficiencies, they hypothesize solutions, and then they test them. Ross didn't look at the global drug trade and see a crime. He looked at it and saw a massive economic inefficiency caused by state interference.
So he wasn't thinking like a gangster.
No, he was thinking like a researcher. He approached the black market as if he were conducting a massive real-world experiment.
So our mission for this deep dive is to map that exact transition. We need to go from the library to the lab to the eventual launch. So let's start with section 1, the idealist. Because before he wrote a single line of code, he was writing forum posts. He was debating philosophy online.
He was devouring it. The sources we have really highlight a very specific intellectual diet. If you want to get your head around the Silk Road, you have to first understand the Austrian School of Economics,
Okay.
specifically the works of Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard.
Okay, let's pause right there. Austrian School of Economics sounds incredibly dry. It sounds like something you sleep through in a 101 class.
It can be, for sure.
But for Ross, this was revolutionary stuff. So what were the
God.
key takeaways? What was he absorbing from these guys that was so powerful?
Well, it really all boils down to a concept called the non-aggression principle, which you'll often see abbreviated as the NAP.
The NAP, okay.
The core argument is that the only truly immoral action a human can take is the initiation of force against another person or their property.
So if I punch you, that's bad.
Yeah.
If I steal your wallet, that's bad. I mean, that seems pretty standard, right? Most people would agree with that.
Exactly. Most of us agree on that basic level. But here is where it gets radical. And this is the part where Ross really latched on. The Austrian school argues that the state, the government, is the ultimate aggressor.
How do they figure that?
Well, think about it. Taxes are money taken by the threat of force. If you don't pay, men with guns will eventually come and put you in a cage. Regulations are enforced by the threat of force. So, to a strict adherent of this philosophy, something like the government's war on drugs isn't just bad policy or, ineffective. It is a profound moral crime.
Because the state is using the threat of violence to tell an individual what they can or cannot do with their own body.
Precisely. It all centers on this idea of self-ownership. Ross came to view this as an absolute. If you own your body, you own your consciousness. Therefore, you have the absolute right to put whatever you want into it. Chemicals, food, anything, provided you don't then use that to hurt anyone else.
So the drug war, in his eyes, wasn't a safety measure.
It was an oppression mechanism,
Yeah.
a fundamental violation of human rights.
Wow. Okay, that is a critical distinction because it completely shifts the narrative, doesn't it? It moves from, I want to break the law to make money, to something more like, the law itself is immoral and I have a moral imperative to ignore it.
It creates a sense of righteousness,
Hmm.
a kind of crusader mentality. The sources mention he eventually started to identify as an anarcho-capitalist. That's a heavy label, but if you follow the logic, it's the only place you can really end up.
Let's unpack that term, anarcho-capitalism, because anarchism and capitalism are two words you don't usually hear together.
Right, they seem contradictory. But it's actually distinct from standard libertarianism. A standard libertarian might say, okay, we need a small government for a few things, build the roads, run the courts, have a military, but just stay out of my business.
The night watchman state.
Exactly. But an anarcho-capitalist says, no, we don't need the state for anything. They believe that all of those functions, roads, courts, police, national defense, can and should be privatized and handled by the free market.
So Ross truly believed that a completely free market, what he called an economic simulation, would just naturally self-regulate better than any government agency ever could.
That was the hypothesis.
Yep.
I mean, he's a physics guy, right? He's thinking in terms of systems. To him, the government is just this artificial friction gumming up the works. So if you remove the friction, you remove all the laws and regulations, the market should, theoretically, reach a perfect, peaceful equilibrium.
The language he uses is so telling. He literally called it an economic experiment in his early writings.
It is. And I think that's the key. He wasn't setting out to build a cartel or become a drug lord. He was building a simulation to prove his professors and his books right. He genuinely wanted to prove that if you gave people total anonymity and total freedom, they wouldn't just descend into chaos. They would trade peacefully.
But there is still this massive gap between, I believe in free markets and I'm going to build a website to facilitate the international sale of heroin. I mean, theoretical physics is safe. This kind of experimental economics gets you life in prison. How does he actually bridge that gap?
Well, the transition happens when the philosophy meets frustration. He's arguing on these forums, he's reading the books, but he realizes it isn't changing anything. The state isn't just going to pack up and go home because he wrote a compelling argument.
Right.
He realized that if he wanted to see a perfect free market in his lifetime, he couldn't wait for the world to change. He had to build a space where the state physically could not enter.
Which brings us to the huge reality check. It's 2010. You have this grand philosophy. You want to create a marketplace where people can trade anything, drugs, sure, but also gold, books, whatever, without the government having any idea. But you have this massive, massive logistical problem.
The internet itself.
Right. This is section 2, the technological paradox. We have this idea of the internet as being anonymous because we don't see each other's faces, but it's actually the most profound surveillance machine ever invented.
Absolutely. Every single device has an IP address.
Yeah.
Every request you make is logged by your internet service provider. If you set up a website called buyillegaldrugshere.com on the regular web, the FBI knows where that server is in about 10 minutes. It's game over.
So it's a fundamental contradiction. He wants open trade, but he needs total secrecy to hide from the state.
Exactly. And to solve it, you have two distinct problems you need to figure out. Location and money. You have to hide the server so it can't be found and raided, and you have to hide the payments so they can't be tracked back to the buyer or seller.
In 2005, this would have been basically impossible.
Impossible.
Yeah.
But by 2010, two completely separate technologies had matured just enough to make a solution theoretically possible. And Ross was in the right place at the right time with the right motivation to see it.
Okay, let's break these down because this really is the architecture of the deep web. The first component is Tor, the onion router.
Tor is just fascinating because of its origin story. It wasn't developed by some rogue hacker group. It was developed by the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory.
I always find that so ironic. The tool used to hide from the government was literally built by the government.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? But it makes sense when you think about it. The goal wasn't to help drug dealers. It was to protect U.S. intelligence communications online.
Okay, how so?
Think about it. If only the Navy uses a special encrypted network, then any traffic on that network is obviously from the Navy. It sticks out like a sore thumb. To truly hide their spies' communications, they needed a lot of other people using the network as digital camouflage.
They needed to hide their signal in the noise.
Exactly. They needed activists, journalists in repressive regimes, and, yeah, even criminals, to create a huge crowd for the spies to hide in. That's why they made it open source and released it to the public.
So explain the onion part. How does it actually hide you? What's happening under the hood?
Okay, imagine you want to send a letter to a destination, but you don't want the destination to know your return address, and you don't want the post office to know where the letter is ultimately going. A tricky problem.
Okay, I'm following.
With Tor, you don't just send the letter directly. First, you put the letter inside an envelope, and you address it to a random volunteer computer, a relay. Let's say it's in France. Then you put that whole envelope inside another envelope, and you address that one to a computer in Brazil.
And then you do it again?
You do it again.
Yeah.
You put that one inside a third envelope addressed to a computer in Japan. You have multiple encrypted layers.
Layers, like an onion.
Right. So when you send it, your computer only knows it's talking to the first computer in Japan. The computer in Japan decrypts one layer, sees the address for Brazil, and passes it on. It has no idea where it came from originally, only that it came from you.
And the computer in Brazil only knows it got something from Japan and is sending it to France.
Precisely. By the time the message gets to the final destination website, all it knows is that the request came from the last computer in the chain, the one in France. The original source, your IP address, is completely lost in this randomized encrypted path.
So there is no direct line. The path is different every time, it's encrypted at every step, and no single point in the chain knows both the origin and the destination.
Exactly. This solves the location problem. Ross realized he could host a website on a server somewhere, and by using Tor, you could make it a hidden service. That's why those sites end in .onion. The server's physical location, whether it was in his basement in Texas or a data center in Iceland, was mathematically concealed from everyone. It's a digital maze with no entrance.
That's incredible. But that's only half the puzzle, right? You can be anonymous, you can browse the catalog of illegal goods, but eventually you have to actually pay for the product.
Right.
And in 2010, what did we have? Credit cards, PayPal, Western Union.
All of which are completely fatal for a black market. They are all tied directly to your real identity, to your bank account. You can't use a Visa card to buy heroin anonymously. It leaves a permanent, undeniable paper trail that leads right to your front door.
And this was the bottleneck. This is why every digital black market attempt before the Silk Road just failed.
They all failed because of the money trail. They could hide, but they couldn't get paid without exposing themselves.
Enter component 2, Bitcoin.
Now, we really have to contextualize this. We're so used to Bitcoin now being on Bloomberg. It's heavily regulated. It's worth tens of thousands of dollars.
It's a financial asset.
It's a mainstream financial asset. But in 2010, Bitcoin was wildly obscure. It was worth pennies. It was an academic curiosity for a very small community of cypherpunks and cryptography nerds. It was not seen as money.
And Ross didn't see it as an investment, did he? He wasn't trying to get rich off the currency itself.
No, not at all. He saw it as the utility. He saw it as the solution to a classic computer science problem called the double spend problem. And he saw that it solved it without a bank.
Okay, explain that simply. Why do we usually need banks for digital money?
Because digital files are infinitely easy to copy. If I email you a photo, I still have the photo. If I were to email you a digital dollar, I shouldn't have that dollar anymore. It needs to be gone from my possession.
Right. Otherwise, I could just copy it a million times and send it to everyone.
Exactly. Before Bitcoin, you needed a bank to be the central authority to verify that transaction. They subtract the dollar from my account and add it to yours. The bank is the trusted third party. Bitcoin's breakthrough was replacing that central bank with a public ledger that everyone could see, the blockchain.
So the network of users verifies the transaction, not a company like Chase or Wells Fargo.
Correct. And because there is no central company, there is no one to shut down your account. There is no know your customer regulation. You can create a Bitcoin wallet without an ID, without a name, without an address. It's not truly anonymous, it's pseudonymous, but for his purposes, that was good enough.
So if Tor creates a digital blind spot for your physical location,
Bitcoin creates a digital blind spot for your financial activity.
that was the aha moment, the synthesis.
That was everything. Ross realized that if you combined Tor's hidden services with Bitcoin's peer-to-peer payments, you created a perfectly closed loop. You had a marketplace where the buyer is anonymous, the seller is anonymous, the server is hidden, and the money is, for all intents and purposes, untraceable, or at least vastly harder to trace than a bank transfer.
It seems so obvious now, in retrospect. I feel like someone would have done it eventually. But at the time, nobody had put these two specific Lego blocks together in this way.
And that's the real innovation, I think. The pieces were just sitting there on the table. The Navy built the secret roads. The cypherpunks built the secret cache. But it took this idealistic, frankly slightly arrogant physics student to look at those two pieces and say, I can build an entire parallel universe with this. He saw the potential for a system where others just saw a novelty.
So he has the theory, the Austrian economics, and now he has the blueprints Tor plus Bitcoin, which brings us to section 3, the build. And this is where the whole criminal mastermind image starts to crack a bit, doesn't it? Because Ross wasn't actually a master coder, was he?
Not at all. Not even close. He was an amateur, a hobbyist at best. The sources describe him teaching himself PHP and MySQL, which are the basic languages of the web on the fly.
So he's not some genius hacker.
No. He was literally copying and pasting code snippets from online forums, trying to figure out how to get the site to work. It's so much less glamorous than you'd think.
That's the part that always fascinates me. We have this image in our heads of a super hacker in a dark room, green text, scrolling down the screen, typing 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Right. The movie version.
Yeah, the movie version. But the reality was just a guy, probably in a remote cabin at first, and then later in various coffee shops in Austin, staring at a laptop, getting frustrated because his database wasn't connecting properly.
And it really highlights the solitary founder dynamic. He couldn't hire a team. He couldn't go on a freelance site and say, hey, I need a web developer.
Right. I'm building a massive international drug market. Can you help me fix this bug in my shopping cart?
Exactly. He was completely, totally isolated by the very nature of his project. He had to be the CTO, the CEO, the head of marketing, and the janitor all at once.
The notes mention the skill gap.
Yeah.
Because he was self-taught, the early code for the Silk Road was apparently a complete mess.
Oh, it was spaghetti code. Total mess. Security researchers who looked at the site's code later on were apparently shocked it held up for as long as it did. They said it was held together with digital duct tape. But his sheer dedication bridged that skill gap. He was obsessed. He really viewed this as his life's work, his magnum opus. He spent months just grinding through the syntax, teaching himself what he needed to know.
And the name he chose, Silk Road. That wasn't just a random, cool-sounding name.
No, it was very deliberate historical branding. The original Silk Road was that ancient network of trade routes that connected the East and the West back during the Han Dynasty.
It's where they traded silk, spices.
Goods, yes, but also, this is crucial ideas, religions, philosophies, technologies. It was a channel for exchange that bypassed the direct control of local warlords and empires. It was its own ecosystem.
So he saw himself as creating a digital successor to that ancient network, a new trade route beyond the reach of the modern state.
Exactly. And his ambitions for the user experience were sky high. He didn't want it to feel like a shady back alley drug deal. He was aiming for the Amazon for drugs.
That comparison comes up constantly in the sources. What does that actually mean in practice? What did he build that was like Amazon?
He understood that the biggest problem in any black market is a total lack of trust, which usually leads to violence. If a drug dealer on the street rips you off, what can you do? You can't call the police. You can't sue him. Your only recourse might be violence.
Which is why the drug trade is so dangerous.
Right. So Ross implemented a reputation system, 5-star reviews, seller feedback, detailed product descriptions, escrow services to hold the payment until the product was delivered.
Just like buying a toaster on Amazon.
Exactly the same model. If a dealer sold you a bad product, you could leave a scathing 1-star review warning everyone else to stay away. This was revolutionary. It created a market incentive for good behavior in a criminal enterprise.
So instead of enforcing contracts with violence,
you enforce contracts with customer service and good reviews. He was trying to civilize the black market, or at the very least, marketize it. He truly believed that a seller's reputation score was a more powerful and moral regulator than the DEA could ever be.
So, okay, the code is mostly written, the server is hidden on Tor, the philosophy is in place. We're moving to section 4, the launch. But a marketplace needs products. You can't open a store with empty shelves. This is that classic chicken and egg problem for any new platform.
Yeah, the cold start problem. He had no sellers because there were no buyers. And he had no buyers because there were no sellers. So what do?
He had to do it himself.
He had to become the first seller. He had to seed the market himself.
And the very first product ever listed for sale on the Silk Road was
hallucinogenic mushrooms.
which he grew himself.
Yes. In a rental property, sort of off the grid. I mean, just stop and think about the risk profile here for a second. He is already coding a website that facilitates multiple felonies. And at the same time, in his closet, he is actively cultivating a felony. He is personally taking on every single layer of risk in this enterprise.
It's insane. And the sources say he then bought them from himself.
He had to test the system. You can't just launch it and hope it works. So he listed the mushrooms on the Silk Road under one username, then he logged in with a different username, and he bought his own mushrooms with a few of his own Bitcoins to make sure the payment actually moved, the order processed correctly, and the whole loop worked.
That is just incredible. It was a completely closed loop of one person. He was the grower, the seller, the buyer, the platform architect, the admin, and the tech support all at once.
It really strips away any of the glamour, doesn't it? It's not some big criminal conspiracy at this point. It's just one guy, alone in a room, moving digital pennies from his left hand to his right hand, just hoping his crazy experiment works.
So when did it actually go live to the public?
January 2011. He quietly puts the link up on a few forums.
And was it an instant hit? Did the floodgates just open and users pour in?
No, not at all. It was a very slow burn. You have to remember, the user experience was really rough back then. Tor is slow by its very nature. Remember all those signals bouncing around the world?
Right.
So loading a single page could take 10, 20, sometimes 30 seconds. And the design was ugly. It looked like a scam website from the 1990s. It was clunky, but it worked. That's the bottom line. It did what it promised to do. A few curious early adopters found their way there. They probably placed a small, skeptical order, and then a package showed up in their mailbox a few days later.
And that must have been a mind-blowing moment.
It changed everything. They realized, wait a minute, I can actually get high-quality product with customer reviews delivered discreetly to my mailbox, and I never have to meet a sketchy guy in a parking lot ever again.
Yeah.
The sheer utility of it completely outweighed the clunky interface. The perfect free market was no longer a theory in a notebook. It was live.
It's just incredible to think about that specific moment in January 2011. The site is up, the first few transactions are trickling in, and the entire world has absolutely no idea that the fundamental landscape of crime has just shifted under its feet.
And you could argue that neither did Ross, really, not the full extent of it. In his mind, he was running a noble libertarian experiment. He saw himself as a liberator, freeing people from the tyranny of the state. He didn't realize he had just lit a fuse that would eventually bring the entire crushing weight of the U.S. government down on his head.
Let's just pull back for a second and look at the big picture of what we've covered. We have the why, this very specific anarcho-capitalist philosophy, and we have the how, this novel architecture combining Tor and Bitcoin.
It really forces you to reevaluate the role of technology in pushing ideology. Ross Ulbricht wasn't a drug kingpin in the traditional sense like an El Chapo. He didn't have territory. He didn't have soldiers on street corners. He had code.
And that code, that one website, challenged the power of the state more effectively than any cartel ever could.
Because it attacked the state's choke points, control of information and control of money. It proved that with the right tools, the laws of a nation-state could be rendered, well, if not obsolete, then at least temporarily irrelevant. It showed that if you provide the architecture for anonymity, the market will flood in to fill the vacuum.
It brings up a really provocative thought for you, the listener, to walk away with. We often attribute the Silk Road to Ross Ulbricht's specific genius, or his madness, depending on your perspective. But looking at the sources, the fact that Tor was already out there, the fact that Bitcoin was emerging, was something like this inevitable?
That is the chilling question, isn't it? If Ross hadn't built it in 2011, would someone else have just built a carbon copy in 2012 or 2013? The technology for this level of anonymity exists. The desire for illicit goods certainly exists. When those two things exist in the world at the same time, the market always finds a way.
So was Ross Ulbricht the great innovator? Or was he just the first person to walk up and realize the door was already unlocked?
I tend to lean toward the latter. The potential for a perfect free market, whether it's for legal or illegal goods, is sort of built into the fabric of the decentralized internet now. The Silk Road wasn't the destination. It was just the first wagon to head west into that new, lawless frontier.
And we're going to leave it right there. January 2011, the experiment is up and running, the mushrooms are in the mail, and a former Boy Scout is sitting in front of his laptop watching the first few Bitcoin roll in, completely unaware of the storm that is gathering just over the horizon. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at a stack of sources that, quite frankly, it reads more like the screenplay for a cyberpunk thriller than, real life.
Oh, it absolutely does. It's a modern tragedy in the classical sense, really. We're looking at hubris, identity, and this massive collision between digital idealism, and, well, federal law enforcement.
And our mission today is to zero in on a very specific window of time. We aren't doing the whole history of the dark web. We are looking at the immediate aftermath of June 1st, 2011.
That's the day the lights got turned on.
Exactly. But before we get there, maybe remind us what the landscape looks like in, say, May 2011.
Quiet. That's really the best word for it. The Silk Road existed, but it was a true underground experiment.
A hidden service on the Tor network.
Right. You needed to know where you were going. It was a small community, mostly libertarians and tech geeks who were trading contraband, mostly drugs, in relative obscurity.
And then the Gawker article drops, June 1st. The headline wasn't subtle. The underground website where you can buy any drug imaginable.
It was the worst possible thing that could have happened. I mean, for an operation that was completely predicated on secrecy.
It wasn't just a mention.
No, the article detailed everything. How to access it, what was for sale, even the prices. It basically demystified the whole thing for the average person.
And usually in the startup world, press is good. You want that viral hit.
You dream of it.
But here, the sources describe just chaotic implosion. It wasn't just that people were looking. The infrastructure physically couldn't handle them.
That's a crucial technical point. The Tor network, which anonymizes traffic by bouncing it all over the world, it wasn't built for that kind of high-volume viral traffic.
So when that Gawker article hit,
tens of thousands of curious people, not even buyers, just looky-loos, flooded the site.
So the site crashes. It's the hug of death.
Exactly. And this is where we get our first real insight into Ross Ulbricht's mindset.
He's the administrator, sitting behind the screen. And the logs and court documents, they paint a picture of someone who is not celebrating the fame.
Far from it. He was terrified. You have to remember, up until this point, Ross viewed this as largely an economic experiment. He was just coding, managing a few vendors. Suddenly, he's frantically trying to rewrite code to keep the servers from melting down, while at the same time realizing his little experiment is now international news.
The sources mention he actually reached out to a mentor figure during this time.
He did. He was practically hyperventilating, discussing an exit strategy.
Oh!
In his mind, he had gone from a guy running a website to a guy with a target on his back. Overnight.
So the rational move would have been to just
wipe the servers, destroy the hard drives, and vanish. That would have been the survivalist move.
But he didn't. And this is the pivot point of the whole story, isn't it? Why stay?
Well, the panic was replaced by something much more seductive. Validation.
And money.
And, of course, revenue. Once the servers stabilized and the gawkers left, the real buyers stayed. And the source material shows a vertical spike in transaction volume.
We're talking about the Gawker bump.
A massive one. In a matter of days, Ross wasn't just making a side income. He was generating a fortune in commissions. The Bitcoin started pouring in at a rate that would make any CEO's head spin.
It's just so interesting how money changes that risk calculus. You know, when you're broke, prison sounds terrifying.
But when you're making millions,
you start to convince yourself you're smart enough to avoid it.
It's classic cognitive dissonance. The money validates the risk. You start telling yourself, if this wasn't meant to be, it wouldn't be this successful. But while he was watching his wallet expand, the external threat was solidifying into something very specific and very dangerous.
Right, because we aren't just talking about local cops anymore. That Gawker article made its way to the halls of the U.S. Senate.
Specifically, to the desks of Senators Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin.
And this is where the tone shifts.
Completely. It goes from internet curiosity to national security threat. Schumer actually went to the Senate floor, held up a printout of the article.
Holding a printout of a dark web drug market, that image is wild.
And he publicly demanded the Department of Justice shut it down.
And that wasn't an empty threat. The sources confirm this is the exact moment the FBI and the DEA opened their official case files.
But here's the problem they had, and it's why this investigation was so unique.
What was it?
Usually, if a senator says shut it down, the FBI sends a subpoena to the web host, gets an IP address, and kicks down a door.
But with Silk Road, they couldn't.
Because of Tor. The whole hidden service architecture meant the FBI had no idea where the server was physically located. It could have been in Iceland, Iran, or New Jersey.
They had a name, Silk Road, and they had a crime.
But they had no address, no physical target.
So you have this standoff. On one side, the U.S. government with all its resources, furious but, temporarily blind.
And on the other side, Ross Ulbricht. Flush with cash, but knowing the Eye of Sauron is looking right for him.
And that pressure cooker environment, it forces an evolution, doesn't it?
It does. Ross realized that admin, which was his handle at the time, was too generic, too weak. If he was going to be the head of a criminal empire that defied the U.S. government, he needed to be more than just an IT guy.
He needed a persona. This brings us to the birth of the Dread Pirate Roberts.
DPR. It's a fascinating choice, not just because it's a pop culture reference, but because of what it signals to his users.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen The Princess Bride in a while, give us the quick rundown on why this name is so important.
Well, in the story, the Dread Pirate Roberts isn't one person. It's a title. It's a legacy.
Okay.
One pirate builds up the reputation, then he retires and passes the name on to a successor. The name itself is what inspires fear and respect, not the man wearing the mask.
So by choosing this, Ross was trying to tell his community what? That I'm replaceable.
More like, I am immortal. He was signaling that Silk Road was an idea, not just one guy. Even if the feds caught the person currently typing, the Dread Pirate Roberts would continue.
It's a brilliant piece of branding. It alleviates the user's biggest fear, that the site would just disappear if the admin got busted.
Exactly. And it also feels like a psychological shield for Ross himself.
Oh, so?
If I'm Ross, I'm a guy breaking the law. But if I'm Dread Pirate Roberts, well, I'm just playing a role. I'm a character in some grand narrative.
That dissociation is key.
Absolutely. We see it in the forum logs. Once he adopts the DPR persona, his whole writing style changes.
It becomes more grandiose.
More philosophical. He stops sounding like a tech support agent and starts sounding like a cult leader.
And the community just ate it up. This is the part of the sources I found most surprising. The culture that formed around him.
It really was.
You expect a drug market to be seedy, transactional, cold, but the Silk Road forums sound weirdly intellectual.
Incredibly high-minded.
Yeah.
You have to remember, the core user base, especially the early adopters, they weren't just junkies. They were libertarians, crypto-anarchists, privacy advocates. They didn't see themselves as criminals. They saw themselves as pioneers of a new economy.
The agorist movement.
Exactly. Agorism is this political philosophy that says the best way to fight the state is to engage in black market counter-economics.
So buying LSD on Silk Road
Wasn't just about getting high. It was a political act. It was civil disobedience.
and DPR leaned heavily into this. The sources mention these manifestos he would post.
Long, detailed essays. He wrote about dropping seeds of freedom in a field of concrete. He framed the Silk Road not as a store, but as a liberation movement.
He told them they were taking back their bodily autonomy from the government.
He did. And then there was the DPR book club.
Which is just, it's astounding.
It is. Here's a site trafficking Class A narcotics. And they have a dedicated forum where the admin is leading discussions on Austrian economic theory and moral philosophy.
It effectively laundered the guilt, didn't it?
That's a great way to put it.
If you're discussing the non-aggression principle while selling heroin, you can convince yourself you're a freedom fighter, not a predator.
That's the utility of the culture. It bound the sellers to the platform. They weren't just vendors paying a commission. They were soldiers in DPR's army.
And DPR was their digital Robin Hood. The users revered him. There are logs where people are thanking him for saving their lives by providing a safe place to buy.
And we should touch on that safety aspect, because that was a huge part of the branding. It wasn't just philosophy.
It was customer service.
It was professional. That was the innovation. Before Silk Road, buying drugs was dangerous and unreliable.
Right.
Silk Road introduced the trust mechanisms of legitimate e-commerce escrow, star ratings, seller feedback to the black market.
So you had things like fair trade cocaine.
You did.
Ah.
And sellers promising lab-tested purity with money-back guarantees. It was meant to mimic Amazon or eBay.
And DPR enforced those rules.
He was the benevolent dictator of this ecosystem. He banned scammers. He resolved disputes.
So let's look at the picture we've painted. It's late 2011, early 2012. You've got a thriving, multi-million-dollar economy, a fanatical community, a leader who writes philosophy manifestos and is seen as a demigod.
A golden age, essentially.
And then we have to cut to the reality of Ross Ulbricht. Because he isn't living on some private island.
No.
He isn't in a Bond villain lair. Where is he?
He's in San Francisco, in a shared apartment.
With roommates.
With roommates who have absolutely no clue. The sources detail this incredible duality. Ross was going by the name Josh in his daily life.
Josh.
Yeah, Josh. And to his roommates, Josh was just a quiet, somewhat nerdy guy who spent a lot of time on his laptop.
Can you imagine that dynamic? You're arguing with Josh about whose turn it is to scrub the toilet.
Yeah, or why the dishes are piling up.
Meanwhile, 5 feet away in his bedroom, he's ordering hits, moving millions in Bitcoin, and writing speeches for thousands of followers.
It must create a tremendous psychological strain. Most people, you vent about your work to your friends or your partner. Ross couldn't say a word.
He had to bottle up the stress of the FBI investigation, the technical glitches, the thrill of the success. Everything.
He was wealthy, but he was trapped.
Rich in Bitcoin, but poor in reality.
Exactly. He couldn't buy a mansion. He couldn't buy a Ferrari. He was paying for his share of the rent in cash to avoid a paper trail.
Living like a pauper while sitting on a dragon's hoard.
And the sources suggest that this isolation just pushed him deeper and deeper into the DPR persona.
It had to. If the real world is a place where you have to hide, where you're just Josh, the quiet roommate, but the online world is where you're the dread pirate Roberts, the king of the dark web.
Which world are you going to prefer?
The mask becomes more comfortable than the face.
Precisely. He spent more and more time in the forums, engaging with the people who worshipped him, because that was the only place he could be his true self, or at least the self he wanted to be.
But while he's getting lost in this role play, reality was closing in. We mentioned the FBI and DEA files earlier. They weren't sitting idle during this golden age.
No, they were grinding. The sources show this massive, albeit uncoordinated effort. You had Homeland Security seizing packages at JFK Airport.
You had the DEA trying to flip low-level dealers.
And the FBI was trying to crack the code of the servers, just constantly poking and prodding.
It's a tragic irony, really. Ross felt invincible because of the DPR myth he created.
Right, the idea that he was smarter, faster, more philosophical than the thugs in the government.
But the government doesn't need to be philosophical. They just need to be persistent.
And they were building a puzzle, piece by tiny piece. While Ross was debating the finer points of agorism in the book club, agents were analyzing shipping patterns and just waiting for one tiny mistake.
The hubris of the dread pirate Roberts was believing that the narrative would protect him, that because he was the good guy in his own story, he would win.
But the tragedy of the mask is that it blinds you. He couldn't see the net tightening because he was too busy looking at the horizon of his libertarian utopia.
So we've gone from a crash caused by a Gawker article to the establishment of a digital empire run by a man living a complete double life.
It's a story about how quickly a person can rationalize their way into becoming something unrecognizable.
It really raises a difficult question about identity. We all curate versions of ourselves online. We all have a bit of a mask.
But Ross Ulbricht took it to the absolute extreme. He built a mask out of encryption and philosophy, and he wore it until it consumed him.
It leaves me wondering, in those quiet moments in that San Francisco apartment when he closed the laptop, did he even know who Ross was anymore? Or was there only DPR left?
That's the real danger of the deep dive, I suppose. Sometimes you go so deep you forget how to come back up for air.
We're going to leave it there for this deep dive. The story of what happens when that net finally closes.
Well, that's a tragedy for another day. Thanks for listening.
Be curious.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are rewinding the tape. We're going back to a very specific moment in time. The year is 2012.
Right.
The iPhone 5 has just hit the shelves. The world is obsessed with Gangnam Style.
Right.
But, in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallways of the Department of Justice in D.C., nobody is dancing.
Oh, definitely not dancing, no.
Yeah.
There is a very specific, very intense panic setting in.
I just want you to picture the scene. You have the entire might of the United States law enforcement apparatus.
We're talking the big guns.
The heavy hitters, right? The FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security, even the IRS. They're all mobilized. They have the budget. They have the manpower. They have the mandate.
And they have a target.
A target they know exists. They can see it. They can literally type a URL into a special browser, visit the website. They can see the drugs being sold. They can read customer reviews for heroin.
It's right there on the screen.
But they cannot touch it.
They cannot touch it. And that is the frustration that really defines this whole story. They are hitting a wall they have literally never encountered in the history of policing.
And that's our hook for today. We're looking at that painful, that messy, and just fascinating transition from traditional door-kicking policing to, ghost chasing in the digital world. We're doing a deep dive into Operation Marco Polo.
Which I have to say is one of the coolest code names in federal
It
history.
really is. It sounds so adventurous.
It fits perfectly, though. Marco Polo was an explorer, right? Going into the unknown. And that is exactly where these agents found themselves.
This is the story of that massive multi-agency investigation into the Silk Road.
But I want to be clear right off the bat, we're not just rehashing the story of the site itself. I mean, we've all read the articles about the libertarian stuff, the economics of the dark web. Today, we are dissecting the hunt.
We're looking at the mechanics of the investigation itself. Because when you really dig into the source material, you're talking about the affidavits, the technical breakdown, the court transcripts, this whole thing plays out like a detective thriller.
It really does.
You have secret flights to Iceland. You have forensic imaging of live servers while they're still processing the illegal transactions. And you have this incredible tension between the digital world and the physical world.
It's a cat and mouse game, except the mouse is invisible and the cat is completely blindfolded.
And the twist, the thing that finally cracks the entire case wide open. It wasn't some super genius NSA hacker, typing code at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
No.
It wasn't a snitch wearing a wire in some back alley.
Here's a glitch.
A mundane, boring, almost ironic technical error. So buckle up. We are going to look at how the government learned to chase ghosts. Let's start with the team. Section 1, the frustration of Operation Marco Polo.
Right. So Operation Marco Polo, this wasn't just one office and one agency. This was a full-on task force. And to really understand why this was so difficult, you have to get the internal dynamics here. You have the DEA, the FBI, the IRS, and DHS all trying to sit at the same table.
That sounds like the Avengers of federal law enforcement.
Or maybe the Suicide Squad, depending on who you ask. My research into the agency dynamics suggests it wasn't exactly a smooth team-up.
Well, you have to remember, these agencies have totally different cultures.
And totally different mandates.
Let's unpack that a bit, because to an outsider, law enforcement is just law enforcement. But they all want different things, don't they?
Completely different things. So take the DEA. What's their job? Their job is to intercept drugs. They want to kick down the door, seize the cocaine, and put the dealer in handcuffs.
They want the physical product.
They want the physical product. They are street-level operators.
Okay, then you've got the IRS.
The IRS doesn't care about the cocaine. Not really. They care about the money.
Right. Follow the money.
They're looking for tax evasion, money laundering. They want the cash flow. Then you have Homeland Security, who's worried about border integrity. How are all these packages getting into the country?
Right.
And finally, you have the FBI, specifically their cyber division, who is trying to take down the entire criminal enterprise using, RICO statutes.
So it's a too many cooks in the kitchen situation.
It's a classic deconfliction nightmare. That's the bureau term for it. You have agents from different agencies literally bumping into each other, stepping on each other's toes.
Everyone wants the collar.
Everyone wants the collar. Everyone wants the headline. But even beyond the ego, and there was plenty of that, there was a fundamental procedural problem. They were trying to apply old school policing to a new school problem.
I read a quote in one of the backgrounders that really stood out to me. It said these guys were used to kicking down doors, not chasing ghosts.
That is the perfect summary. I mean, think about how a traditional drug investigation works. It's linear. It's physical. You buy drugs from a street dealer. You squeeze him. He flips on a supplier to get a later sentence. You follow the supplier to a warehouse. You watch the warehouse. You see who comes and goes. You follow the money to the boss. It's a physical chain of evidence.
You can literally draw a line on a map.
Exactly. But with the Silk Road, that chain is broken instantly. It's shattered and scattered all across the digital ether.
So by 2012, the desperation must have been setting in.
Oh, it was palpable. You have senators asking questions, why is there an Amazon for heroin on the internet and why haven't you shut it down?
And the honest answer, which is, we don't know where the server is, that's not an acceptable answer for the FBI director to give to Congress.
It's humiliating. It really is. They had the warrant. They had the desire. But they didn't have the coordinates.
Okay, so let's break down the why. Why was it so hard? We always hear about Tor and Bitcoin. They're the buzzwords. But let's get a little technical. Why were these such effective shields? Let's start with Tor.
The onion router.
I think most people have a vague idea that it hides your location. But how?
Technically speaking. Because I think we imagine it just, makes you invisible, like a cloak or something.
It's less like a cloak and more like a shell game. A really complex one. In a normal internet connection, your computer sends a request directly to a server. Let's say you want to visit Google. Your computer said, hey, Google, show me this page.
And that request has your IP address on it, your digital return address.
It's a direct line, which means if you're doing something illegal, the police can just subpoena Google, get that IP, call your internet service provider, and they know your physical home address.
Takes about an hour of paperwork.
Precisely. But Tor breaks that direct line. Tor bounces your request through a network of volunteer computers or nodes all around the world. It wraps your request in layers of encryption like an onion.
Hence the name.
Exactly. So your data goes to Node A. Node A peels off one layer of encryption, reads the instructions, and sees it needs to go to Node B.
But Node A doesn't know who you are. It doesn't know who you are, and it doesn't know the final destination. It only knows, I got this from somewhere, and I need to send it to Node B. Then Node B peels a layer and sends it to Node C, and so on.
And by the time it gets to the website.
The website has absolutely no idea where the request originated. But here's the critical part for the Silk Road. Tor also offers something called hidden services. It works in reverse. The server itself can also hide behind the Tor network.
So the user is hiding and the website is hiding.
Exactly. They are meeting in a digital no man's land. The user doesn't know where the server is physically located, and the server doesn't know where the user is. It's a double-blind system.
So the FBI can look at the website all day long. They can browse listings for fake passports. But they can't trace the wire back to a building.
Technically, it's impossible. If Tor is configured correctly, you can't triangulate the server. You can't just ping it and get a location.
Okay, so that's the where. That hides the physical location. What about the who? Because that's where the money comes in, right?
Yeah.
In the old days, you followed the cash.
Right. And that brings us to Bitcoin. Now, a common misconception, and this was even more common back in 2012, is that Bitcoin is anonymous.
It's not.
It is not. It's pseudonymous.
Which means?
It means that instead of a name, you have a wallet address. Just a long string of numbers and letters. But the blockchain, the public record of all Bitcoin transactions, is permanent. It's written in stone. If I can link your wallet address to your real identity.
Say, because you used your bank account to buy the Bitcoin in the first place.
Exactly. Then I can see everything you have ever bought or sold.
Which sounds like a dream for an agency like the IRS. They love paper trails.
It would be. But the Silk Road implemented something called tumblers or mixers.
I love the term tumbler. It sounds like a laundry cycle.
That's the perfect analogy. It is essentially money laundering as a service.
Yeah.
So let's say you want to buy something on Silk Road. You don't send your Bitcoin directly to the seller. You send it to the Silk Road's internal wallet. The tumbler takes your coins. It chops them up into these tiny random fractions. It mixes them with thousands of other users' coins in this massive digital pool. It bounces them through hundreds of temporary disposable wallets, and then it reassembles the correct amount in the seller's account.
So you try to follow that specific coin on the blockchain.
You hit a wall of static.
Yeah.
It breaks that linear link between the sender and the receiver. You can see money going in and you can see money coming out, but you can't tell which coin belongs to who.
So let's go back to our frustrated agents in 2012. They can't trace the server because of Tor. They can't trace the money because of mixers.
It was, from a technical perspective, the perfect infrastructure. It was an engineering marvel. It really was.
I can just feel the tension rising. It's like trying to catch smoke with a net. And the site is growing, the media is starting to talk about it.
And that adds so much pressure. When Gawker published that famous article about the Silk Road, traffic just exploded. The politicians got involved. And suddenly, Operation Marco Polo isn't just an investigation. It's a mandate. They have to find a way in.
So they're desperate. They're scouring the site. The FBI's cyber division is looking for anything, a loose thread, a tiny crack in the armor. And this is where we move to Section 2. The breakthrough, because they find it. But it's not in the encryption code. It's not in the blockchain. Where do they find the vulnerability?
It's on the login page.
The front door.
The front door, specifically the CAPTCHA.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because this is hilarious to me in a dark way.
Mm-hmm.
A CAPTCHA is that annoying thing where you have to click on all the pictures of traffic lights or type in the squiggly letters.
Right. To prove you're not a robot.
To prove you're not a robot.
Right. CAPTCHA stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to Tell Computers and Humans Apart. It's a security feature. Its entire job is to keep bots from spamming the site or launching denial of service attacks.
So the security feature becomes the security flaw.
That is the beautiful irony that defines this whole case. The Silk Road had grown so big that they were getting spammed. So the administrator, the Dread Pirate Roberts, decided to add a CAPTCHA to the login page. It's a standard security practice.
Seems totally reasonable.
But, and this is a massive but, Whoever configured that CAPTCHA made a mistake, a simple coding error.
Walk us through the glitch. What actually happened, technically?
Okay, so think about that Tor tunnel we talked about. Everything is supposed to stay inside that encrypted tunnel, right? When you load the Silk Road login page, the server sends that page through the tunnel to you.
Right, all hidden.
But the CAPTCHA needs to load an image, those squiggly letters. Because of the misconfiguration, when the login page loaded, the code for the CAPTCHA didn't look inside the server for that image. It tried to pull a resource from a specific location that forced it to reach outside the Tor tunnel.
It stepped out of the dark.
For a split second, a fraction of a moment. The server made a direct request to the open internet. It bypassed the encryption entirely.
And when a server makes a request to the open internet, it has to reveal itself.
Exactly. To get data from the internet, you have to say, send the data here. And here is an IP address, a real public-facing IP address.
That is just wild. I mean, years of sophisticated cryptography, millions of dollars in Bitcoin mixers, strict operational security, all undone because a login puzzle wasn't set up quite right.
It just highlights the fragility of anonymity in the digital age. You can build a fortress with walls a mile high, but if you leave one tiny window unlatched, it doesn't matter. One line of bad code unraveled the entire operation. This is what we call a leak.
And the FBI was watching.
The FBI was monitoring the traffic, looking for patterns, for anything unusual, and suddenly they saw it. They saw the server just poke its head up.
Just for a millisecond.
But that was enough. They caught the IP address.
And an IP address is a physical address. It's a map coordinate.
Correct. It points to a machine.
And where did the map point?
Reykjavik, Iceland.
Wow. Talk about a change of scenery.
Ugh.
We're going from the abstract digital ether to the frozen north.
A data center in Reykjavik. This was the breakthrough operation Marco Polo had been praying for. They finally had a physical location, a box.
So this leads us to Section 3, the Reykjavik raid. Now, when I watch movies, this is the part where the SWAT team kicks down the door, rappels from the ceiling, and just starts unplugging everything.
And that is exactly what they could not do.
Why not? I mean, isn't that the goal? Stop the crime.
That's the long-term goal. But they had a massive strategic problem. First of all, sovereignty. This is Iceland. The FBI has no jurisdiction there. They can't carry guns. They can't kick down doors in Reykjavik. They had to play nice with the Icelandic authorities.
Okay, so legal hurdles. That makes sense.
But more importantly, there were technical hurdles. They were terrified of the kill switch.
Explain that. What's a kill switch?
If you're running an illegal server of this magnitude, you usually have encryption triggers. Modern servers store the encryption keys, the codes that unlock all the data in the RAM. That's the short-term memory of the computer.
And RAM is volatile, right?
Yeah. Exactly. If you cut the power, the RAM clears. It wipes itself instantly. So if the FBI just ran in and pulled the plug, the server would shut down, the RAM would clear, and when they tried to turn it back on, the hard drive would be a brick.
Locked.
Locked. Encrypted, completely unreadable. They would have the box, but they wouldn't have the evidence.
They'd have a wildly expensive paperweight.
That's it. And there's another risk. If the administrator, Dread Pirate Roberts, saw his server go offline unexpectedly, he would know he was compromised, he would panic, he'd destroy his own backups, wipe his own laptop, and just disappear.
So the element of surprise was everything. They needed the site to stay up and running.
They needed the Dread Pirate Roberts to feel safe. They needed him to keep logging in, keep doing business, completely unaware that the feds were standing right next to his machine.
So what's the alternative to just seizing it?
Surveillance. And something called imaging.
Imaging.
Yeah.
Explain that process for us.
Imaging is a forensic term. It basically means creating a perfect bit-for-bit duplicate of the hard drive, every single one and every single zero. But here's the challenge. They had to do this live.
Live.
While the server was running. While it was still processing drug deals, they flew a team to Iceland in secret. They entered the data center, this cold, loud room filled with rows and rows of humming server racks.
I can just picture the blinking lights.
When they locate the specific machine hosting the Silk Road, they have to hook up their forensic equipment to the server's ports and basically suck the data out without disrupting the flow of traffic so much that it alerts the administrator.
That sounds incredibly risky. It's like trying to perform heart surgery on a guy while he's running a marathon.
It's exactly like that. If they caused the server to lag too much or if they accidentally tripped a security sensor, the game was over. The tension in that room must have been off the charts. You're physically touching the machine that runs the biggest criminal empire on the web, just hoping the guy running it doesn't notice you poking around.
But they pulled it off.
They pulled it off. They successfully imaged the entire drive. They packed up their gear, and they left the server running.
That is the craziest part to me. They left it running.
They had to. They needed to maintain that illusion of normalcy while they went back and analyzed the data they'd copied.
So they take this hard drive image back to the lab. Section 4. The treasure trove. What did they find when they finally cracked it open?
Everything. The term treasure trove is overused, but here it is absolutely literal. They found the entire history of the enterprise.
Be specific. What are we looking at?
We're looking at the financial ledgers detailing millions and millions of dollars in sales, every single Bitcoin transaction. We're looking at the user database usernames, encrypted passwords. But most importantly, they found the chat logs.
The private messages.
The private messages between the Dread Pirate Roberts and his employees, his personal diary entries, his administrative notes. They basically found the brain of the Silk Road.
They found its memory.
And buried in that massive amount of data, they found a smoking gun, or maybe more accurately, a loose thread that led to a person.
So we're not talking about code anymore. We're talking about a file.
A digital file. Buried deep in a folder on the server, they found a fake ID.
A fake ID?
For who? It was an image file of a fake driver's license. And the face on that license was a young man named Ross Ulbricht.
Ross Ulbricht. So this is the first time in the investigation, at least in this part of the timeline, that a real name is connected to the persona. Up until now, Dread Pirate Roberts was a myth, a ghost.
He was a complete ghost.
Yeah.
Now, you might ask yourself, why on earth would the mastermind of a billion-dollar drug empire keep a picture of his own fake ID on the master server of that drug empire?
It seems incredibly sloppy. I mean, rule number 1 is don't put your name on the crime.
It was incredibly sloppy. The leading theory is that he needed the fake ID to verify his identity with other hosting providers or other services to rent more server space. He was trying to expand the infrastructure.
And you just, saved the file in the wrong folder?
Yeah.
Or forgot to delete it?
He treated the Silk Road server like his own personal Dropbox. It's complacency. When you get away with something for years, when you believe you are smarter than everyone else, you stop checking your blind spots. You stop worrying about the little things.
So, connecting the dots here. You have the server in Iceland. You have the data from the server. You have a name and a face, Ross Ulbricht. You look him up, you see he's a 20-something living in San Francisco. This feels like the end of the movie. Case closed. Go arrest him.
You would think so. But this brings us to Section 5, the attribution dilemma. And this is arguably the most difficult part of the entire investigation.
Attribution. That's a lawyer word. What does it mean in this context?
It means proving that Ross Ulbricht is the Dread Pirate Roberts. Not just that he knows him, not just that his picture is on the server, but that he himself is him.
But why isn't the picture enough? I mean, if I find a picture of you in my bank vault, surely that implies it's my vault.
It implies a connection, but it doesn't prove control. Enter the Sodide defense.
That's Odidi.
Some other dude did it.
The classic, it wasn't me.
In cybercrime, this is a huge, huge hurdle. Imagine they raid Ross's apartment at 3 a.m. He's asleep in bed. They kick down the door, they grab his laptop, and they arrest him.
Okay.
His laptop is encrypted. He refuses to give up the password. Now they're in court. Ross's lawyer stands up and says, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, yes, that is my client's laptop. Yes, his picture was on that server, but Ross is a radical libertarian writer. He has enemies. Someone hacked his Wi-Fi. Someone planted those files on the server to frame him. The real Dread Pirate Roberts is a criminal genius who is using my client as a patsy."
And without the contents of the laptop to prove otherwise.
That creates reasonable doubt, a mountain of it.
Mm-hmm.
The server in Iceland is just a machine. It proves the crime happened, but it doesn't definitively prove who was typing on the keyboard in San Francisco at the exact moment the crimes were being committed.
So the physical evidence, the server, gave them the where and the who, but it didn't give them the definitive act.
They needed the holy grail of cybercrime prosecution. They needed to catch him with his fingers on the keyboard, logged into the Silk Road administrative panel with the screen unlocked.
They needed to catch the ghost while he was haunting the house.
Precisely. If he had time to hit a panic button, if he had even a second to close his laptop, the encryption would kick in. And if that laptop is encrypted, all that evidence, the chat logs on his end, the Bitcoin wallets, the keys, it's all locked away forever. They wouldn't be able to prove he was the one running the show.
So the stakes shift again. The mission went from how do we find the server to how do we arrest this guy without him touching a single key.
It sets the stage for a physical confrontation that had to be perfectly choreographed. They couldn't just knock on his door. They had to catch him in public using public Wi-Fi, fully logged in.
Which, of course, eventually leads to the famous arrest in the Glen Park Library in San Francisco.
Right, where they literally had to snatch the open laptop out from under his hands before he could even react. But that is a deep dive for another day.
For today, focusing on Operation Marco Polo, it really highlights this incredible evolution of law enforcement.
It does. It shows the transition from the physical to the digital and then right back to the physical. They used technology to find the server detecting that CAPTCHA leak, but they needed human boots on the ground in Reykjavik to image it. They used data to find Ross, but they needed a physical surveillance team to track him.
And let's not forget the hero or the villain, depending on your perspective of this entire story. The glitch.
The glitch.
If that CAPTCHA had been configured correctly, if that one line of code had been double-checked.
We might still be talking about the Silk Road today, or at least the investigation would have dragged on for years and years longer. It really underscores that in these massive, complex systems, the weakest link is usually something trivial. It's not the unbreakable encryption algorithm, it's the login page. It's human error.
It makes you think about our own digital footprints, doesn't it? We rely on these tools, VPNs, encryption, passwords, to keep our data private. We think we're secure. But all it takes is one server configuration error, one split-second leak, and your IP address is out there.
That's the scary reality. There is no such thing as perfect anonymity on the internet. There's only good enough security until someone finds the crack. And with the resources of the federal government looking for that crack, it's really only a matter of time.
So what does this all mean for us? I think it's a reminder that while the digital world feels so separate from the real world, it's always tethered to it. A server has to be plugged into a wall somewhere, a Bitcoin wallet belongs to a person, and a ghost eventually has to manifest.
And when it does, Operation Marco Polo proved that the authorities will be waiting.
It's a fascinating case study in persistence, technology, and just plain luck. We started with the digital wall, and we ended with a treasure trove of evidence, all thanks to a CAPTCHA that just wanted to talk to the internet.
It's the butterfly effect of cybercrime.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the technical hunt for the Silk Road. It's a story of frustration, innovation, and ultimately attribution.
And a pretty good warning to always check your code.
Always check your code. And for you listening, here's a final thought to chew on. We spend so much of our lives online now, assuming a certain level of invisibility. We lurk, we browse, we comment. But if the Dread Pirate Roberts, who took every precaution imaginable, who built a digital fortress, couldn't stay hidden, can any of us? Is true anonymity actually possible? Or is there always a leak waiting to happen? Something to think about next time you click I am not a robot. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We need to start today by asking you to just kind of destroy a mental image you might be holding on to.
Okay, which image is that?
The image of the Silk Road as this clean, ideological battle. You know, if you follow tech history or even just pop culture, you know the mythology. It's the brilliant libertarian coder versus the overreaching state.
Right, it's an intellectual debate.
Exactly. It's the social network, but with drugs. It's about free markets and cryptography.
The whole St. Ross narrative, the idea that Ross Ulbricht was just this naive idealist who built a platform and then sort of looked away while all the bad things happened on it.
Yeah. But today,
Yeah.
we are taking a sledgehammer to that narrative.
Yeah.
Because we're digging into part 4, corruption in the shadows and this source material.
Yeah.
It doesn't paint a picture of a debate club. It paints a picture of a bloodbath.
This is the point in the timeline where the genre of the story just completely changes. We switch from a tech thriller, a cat and mouse chase, to a really gritty, violent noir film. We aren't just talking about coding anymore. We're talking about, serious federal corruption, torture, and murder for hire.
And the most disturbing part, really, is that the villains in this chapter, they aren't just the drug dealers. They're the guys with the badges.
And that's the hook, isn't it? We're going to unpack how 2 federal agentsmen sworn to uphold the law didn't just break the rules. They essentially became the cartel they were supposed to be hunting.
And at the same time, we're going to look at the total psychological collapse of Ross Ulbricht, who went from preaching this principle of non-aggression to paying for an execution in just a matter of months.
So how does that happen? How does a man who claims to be a peaceful libertarian end up ordering a hit? And how do the people sworn to catch him end up being just as criminal, if not more so?
So if you think you know the Silk Road story, you need to stay with us. Because you probably don't know about this soup.
Oh, the soup.
Yeah.
The soup is, well, we'll get to the soup. It's maybe the most absurd and horrifying detail in this entire case.
Okay, let's set the scene properly then. To really understand this disaster, you have to get the geography of the investigation. We usually hear about the FBI team in New York.
Right.
They were the ones doing the sophisticated cyber sleuthing, trying to find the servers in Iceland, all that high-tech stuff.
Correct. That was the official investigation. It was very rigid, procedural, totally by the book. But at the exact same time, down in Baltimore, there was another task force that was, well, let's just call it loose.
Loose feels
Oh.
extremely generous based on these files.
It was the Wild West, truly.
Yeah.
You had this mix of agencies, DEA, Secret Service, Homeland Security, all kind of thrown together with very, very little oversight.
Right.
And in the middle of this chaotic task force, you have two men who looked at the Silk Road and they didn't see a crime scene.
They saw a bank vault.
A bank vault with the door left wide open.
So let's profile them. First up, we have Carl Mark Force from the DEA. I mean, even the name sounds like he was written by a screenwriter who wasn't trying very hard.
He really fits the profile of the bad lieutenant almost too perfectly. Force was a veteran agent, but he had a history. He was aggressive, issues with alcohol, prone to just going off script.
Okay.
And in the Baltimore investigation, he was the lead undercover agent. So his job was to create a persona, get onto the Silk Road, and make contact with the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Which is standard procedure, right?
Mhm.
You need to gain the target's trust to build a case.
Sure. But usually, you do that to gather evidence for an indictment. Force started doing it to build himself a retirement fund. He realized something that his superiors just did not get.
What was that?
The bosses didn't understand Bitcoin.
This is 2013, we should say.
Hmm.
To most people over 40, Bitcoin is still just magic internet money.
Exactly. To the higher-ups at the DEA, Bitcoin was like points in a video game. They didn't really grasp that it was untraceable, liquid cash. Force realized that he could operate in this digital shadow. He could extort targets, steal funds, and as long as he didn't leave a paper trail in the physical world,
Nobody in his office would ever know.
no one would be the wiser.
So he creates this persona, Knob, and he starts talking to Ross. But he's not just buying drugs to prove a case. What is he actually doing?
He's playing a double game. It's brilliant in a corrupt way. As Knob, he presents himself to Ross not as some small-time drug user, but as a smuggler. A real heavy hitter who can move huge amounts of product and, more importantly, handle problems.
Okay, so he's building this tough guy reputation.
Right. And simultaneously, Force starts selling actual classified police information to Ross.
Wait, hold on. Pause right there. He is sitting at a DEA desk, presumably with his badge on his belt, typing on a government computer. And he is telling the #1 target of the investigation, hey, the FBI is looking into this server, or here's what they know about your location.
Yes,
Like-
that's exactly what was happening. He was selling the investigation to the target of the investigation. He charged Ross for what he called counterintelligence.
Wow.
It's like a bank robber paying the security guard to get the schedule for the armored trucks. That's what Force was doing. And Ross, who was becoming more and more paranoid, was more than willing to pay, and pay heavily, for this inside info.
It creates this bizarre, dangerous feedback loop. Ross feels invincible because he thinks he has a mole on the inside, which emboldens him to take even bigger risks.
Precisely. But Force isn't the only one. He's not working alone in his corruption. He has a partner in crime, literally. A guy named Sean Bridges from the Secret Service.
Now, Bridges is a different kind of animal, though, right? Force sounds like the muscle, the street guy. Bridges sounds more like the brains.
Bridges was the tech guy. He was the computer forensics expert on the Baltimore team. So his job was supposed to be tracing the money. Instead, he figured out how to steal it.
How does a Secret Service agent even steal Bitcoin? I mean, it's not like it's in a physical evidence locker.
Well, it wasn't in an evidence locker yet. That's the key. Bridges, through the investigation, gained access to a seized administrator account on the Silk Road.
And an admin account is like,
It's like having the master key to the entire building. You can see user messages, you can reset passwords, and most importantly, you can access the internal wallets where the site holds its money.
the escrow system.
Right. So when you bought drugs on the Silk Road, your Bitcoin didn't go straight to the dealer. It sat in a holding account escrow until you confirmed you got the package. Bridges used that admin key to just sweep those escrow accounts clean. He transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin directly into his own private wallets.
And then what? Does he just cash out at a Bitcoin ATM?
He was a lot smarter than that. He routed the money through Mt. Gox, which was the big Japanese Bitcoin exchange at the time, using a really complex series of transactions to try and wash it to make it untraceable.
But here's the problem with stealing from the Silk Road,
Mm-hmm.
right? Ross Ulbricht isn't just a CEO. He's the guy who built the whole system. He's watching the ledger.
Mm-hmm. He sees the hole in the balance sheet.
Instantly.
Instantly. Ross sees a massive chunk of money just vanish. And he knows, because of how it was taken, that it had to be an admin who took it.
This is where the story pivots. This is where it goes from just a heist to a real tragedy. Because Bridges can't let Ross think it was just some random hack. He needs a patsy.
He needs a scapegoat. And the perfect scapegoat was a man named Curtis Green.
We really need to humanize Curtis Green for a second. Because in all of this source material, he's the person I feel the most empathy for. He wasn't a kingpin. He wasn't a corrupt Fed. Who was he?
Curtis Green was, a middle-aged guy living in Utah. He was suffering from chronic pain, which is how he got involved in the Silk Road in the first place, actually. He was buying pain meds.
Yeah.
And eventually he started chatting with the admins on the site, and Ross hired him.
Hired him as what? A drug mule? A hitman?
Customer service?
You're kidding?
No. He was a moderator. His job was to reset passwords, settle disputes between buyers and sellers. Basically, he was a salaried employee making a pretty modest income to answer help desk tickets for a massive black market website.
So he's the IT guy. And suddenly he's in the crosshairs of the Secret Service.
The Baltimore team raids Green's house. They burst in, guns drawn, arrest him. Now, this is the crucial part. Sean Bridges is there at the raid. He's the one who interrogates Green. And during this interrogation, Bridges demands Green's login credentials for the Silk Road. His username, his password.
Which I guess legally he can do. He's investigating the site.
Sure, but here's the twist. Bridges then takes those credentials, logs into the Silk Road as Curtis Green, and uses that specific logged-in session to steal the hundreds of thousands of dollars we just talked about.
That's diabolical.
It's a perfect frame-up because from Ross's perspective, when he looks at his server logs, what does he see? He sees Curtis Green log in, and then he sees the money disappear.
And Ross has no idea Green has been arrested. He has no clue a Secret Service agent is the one typing on the keyboard.
None. All he sees is his trusted employee, his admin, robbing him blind.
Okay, so let's put ourselves in Ross's head for a minute. You are running a $100 million criminal empire. You are totally isolated. You're paranoid. And the one guy you trusted to help run the ship just stabbed you in the back and stole a fortune.
This is the catalyst. This is the moment the non-aggression principle dies.
We hear that term a lot with the Silk Road, the non-aggression principle. Can we just quickly define that for anyone who might not be familiar?
It's a core tenet of libertarian philosophy. The idea is basically that you can do whatever you want, buy whatever, sell whatever, smoke whatever, as long as you do not initiate physical force against another person or their property.
And Ross built the whole ethos of the Silk Road on this. He argued that the drug war was inherently violent and his site was the peaceful free market alternative.
But now he's been robbed. In the real world, if your employee embezzles $300,000, what do? You call the police. You sue them.
Right, you have institutional recourse.
Exactly. But in the black market, there is no recourse. You can't call 911. The only justice available is the justice you enforce yourself. Ross was faced with a binary choice. Let Curtis Green get away with it and look weak to everyone else on the site, or break his own foundational rule.
And this is where Agent Force, playing his undercover character Knob, starts whispering in his ear.
Force is a master manipulator here. He's in the chat with Ross and he tells him, look, in my world, in the smuggling world, when someone steals from you, you have to make an example of them. If you don't, everyone will start stealing from you. He is actively goading Ross into violence.
Let's look at the chat logs, because the language here, it's not ambiguous at all. It starts with Ross just wanting Green beat up, right?
Initially, yes. Ross asks Knob to send some guys to tune him up. He wants the money back, and he wants Green to suffer for the betrayal. But then the conversation shifts. Force, as Knob, tells Ross, look, we can beat him, but he might talk to the cops. He's a liability now.
And Ross makes the jump.
Ross types, and this is a direct quote, can you change the order to execute rather than torture?
Change the order to execute. He said it like he's changing a lunch order from a salad to a sandwich.
Then he negotiates the price. They haggle back and forth a bit. They finally settle on $80,000. Ross transfers the Bitcoin.
This is the crossing the Rubicon moment. He is just paid for a human life.
Yeah.
But this is where the story gets even more twisted. Because Agent Force and Agent Bridges, they might be corrupt, but they aren't actually hitmen.
Right.
They can't actually kill Curtis Green.
No, they can't. In fact, by this point, Green is a cooperating witness. He's in federal custody. But Force and Bridges have a huge problem. They've already taken the $80,000 from Ross.
So they need to prove the job is done so they can keep the money.
Exactly. They need to provide proof of death. They have to fake a murder.
This brings us to the Marriott hotel room. This scene is, it's hard to believe it's real.
It sounds like something out of a bad movie. You have two federal agents and a terrified IT guy, Curtis Green, who they've taken out of custody. They take him to this hotel room and they tell him, okay, we need you to play dead. We need to take a picture of you looking like you've been executed.
Imagine being Curtis Green in that moment. You've been arrested, your life is over, you're terrified, and now the agents who arrested you are telling you to pretend you've been murdered.
It gets so much worse. They need it to look real. They need it to be graphic. They need blood. But they don't have any stage blood.
So what do?
So they go to a grocery store.
Please tell me this is where the soup comes in.
This is exactly where the soup comes in. They bought a can of Campbell's soup. The reports vary, but I believe it was chicken vegetable. They took Curtis Green, threw him on the floor of the hotel room, and just splashed soup all over his head and face to simulate brain matter and blood spatter.
I'm trying to visualize this. A DEA agent is standing over a terrified man covered in noodles and carrots, snapping photos with a digital camera, and thinking to himself, yeah, this looks like a professional mob hit.
It's the theater of the macabre. It's so darkly absurd, it's almost funny, but you have to remember the context. They sent these photos to Ross.
And Ross didn't know it was soup.
No. He was sitting in front of his laptop, thousands of miles away, looking at what he absolutely believed was the corpse of a man he had known for years, a man he had just paid $80,000 to have killed.
This is the moment I really want to drill down on. The psychological impact. Most people, if they saw a photo of a friend they had just had killed, a death they directly caused, they would vomit. They would have a complete breakdown.
Yeah.
How did Ross react?
We have his chat logs, his conversation with Nob right after he received the photo. And his reaction is, it's chillingly pragmatic. He wrote, and again, this is a quote, "I'm a little disturbed, but I'm okay. I'm new to this kind of thing."
I'm new to this kind of thing.
Let that phrase just sit with you for a second. He's not talking about learning a new software update. He's talking about murder. He is framing it as a skill acquisition, as a business hurdle. I'm new to it, but I'll get used to it.
It sounds like the online disinhibition effect on, 1,000 times steroids.
Can you expand on that a bit?
It's the psychological theory that when you're behind a screen, you detach from the real-world moral consequences of your actions. It's why people are so awful in YouTube comments. But here it's being applied to homicide. The screen, the Tor browser, the Bitcoin, it all acts as a buffer. It gamifies reality. To Ross, Curtis Green wasn't a flesh-and-blood human being with a family anymore. He was an obstacle in the game that just needed to be deleted.
That's a perfect analysis. The abstraction of the internet just made the violence palatable, and once that seal was broken, once he had deleted Curtis Green from the game, it became so much easier to do it again.
Because it wasn't just Curtis Green, was it? This wasn't a one-off.
No. The floodgates opened. Over the next few months, Royce faced other threats. There was a user named Reed and White who claimed to be a member of the Hells Angels, and he started extorting Ross for money.
And Ross didn't try to negotiate or call his bluff.
He didn't even try. He went straight to the solution that he thought worked last time.
He ordered more hits?
The source material suggests he paid for 5 more murders. He sent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in Bitcoin to have these blackmailers eliminated.
And were they? Were there 5 more bodies found in a ditch somewhere connected to this?
And that is the final brutal twist of the knife in this whole saga. No, no bodies were ever found. The police believed that this Reed and White character was just another scammer.
You kidding?
He realized Ross was paranoid and willing to pay for murder, so he just invented fake victims, demanded money from Ross to kill them, took the Bitcoin, and laughed all the way to the bank.
So Ross was paying for hits on ghosts. He was being extorted by a hitman who was extorting him for hits that never happened.
Exactly. But here's the question. Does that change Ross's moral culpability? In his mind, those people were real. In his mind, he was paying for real deaths. The intent was 100% there.
It completely destroys the argument that he was just a host for the site.
Hmm.
The landlord isn't responsible if a tenant commits a crime, sure. But if the landlord pays a guy 80 grand to go shoot the tenant, it's a very different story.
It completes the transformation. The hippie idealist didn't just fade away. He was murdered and replaced by the drug kingpin persona. Ross became the very thing he claimed to hate, a violent, authoritarian figure using force to protect his empire.
But we have to circle back to the corruption. We have to. Because none of this happens. The murder plot, the soup, the psychological break without Agent Force and Agent Bridges setting the whole thing in motion.
That is the ultimate tragedy of this deep dive. You have a criminal, Ross, being actively radicalized into violence by the police who are supposed to be stopping him.
It's a total systemic failure. You expect the bad guys to be bad, that's their role. But here, the good guys were actually the accelerant. They didn't put out the fire. They poured gasoline all over it.
And Force and Bridges delegitimized the entire investigation. In fact, their corruption was so profound that when the trial eventually happened, Ross's defense team trying to argue that everything was tainted.
How so?
They argued that Force and Bridges might have had access to the Silk Road servers and could have planted evidence against Ross to cover their own crimes.
Did that argument work?
No, ultimately it didn't. The judge ruled that the mountain of other evidence, the laptop found with Ross, his personal journals, all the other chat logs, was just overwhelming. But it shows you how dangerous this kind of corruption is. It nearly let the biggest cyber criminal of the decade walk free because two agents wanted to buy new sports cars.
And where are Force and Bridges now, by the way? Did they get away with any of this?
They did not. The blockchain, for all its anonymity, is still a public ledger. Eventually, smart investigators, the honest ones, traced the money. They saw the transfers from the Silk Road wallets directly to Force's and Bridges' personal accounts. Both were arrested, charged, and sentenced to federal prison.
So in the end, the Silk Road really did destroy everyone. It put Ross in prison for life. It put the agents in prison. It traumatized the employees like Curtis Green. It's like a radioactive core. Anyone who got too close to that much money and that much power just got sick.
That's the key takeaway, I think. We tend to think of corruption as, these envelopes of cash passed under a table in a dark alley. But this was digital corruption. It was fast, it was anonymous, and it was absolute. The lack of guardrails in that digital underground didn't just allow for drug sales, it stripped away the moral compass of every single person involved.
It's a harsh lesson. We build these technologies, encryption, cryptocurrency, to create freedom, to escape the system. But when you completely remove the system, you also remove the safety net. And what you're left with isn't some libertarian utopia, it's the law of the jungle.
And in the jungle, the person with the biggest stick, or in this case, the most Bitcoin, makes the rules, even if that rule is kill the guy who stole from me.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought today. We often debate nature versus nurture, right? Was Ross Ulbricht always a potential killer? Was there some dormant Heisenberg inside him just waiting for the right circumstances to come out?
Or was he a product of his environment? If Curtis Green hadn't been framed by a corrupt Secret Service agent, if Carl Force hadn't whispered in his ear that execution was the only logical next step, would Ross Ulbricht just be a guy who ran a controversial website?
We'll never know the answer to that. But we do know that when you stare into the abyss for too long, sometimes the abyss sends you a picture of a guy covered in soup. And if you look at that and say, I'm okay with this, you're already lost.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's it for this deep dive into the shadows of the Silk Road. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture the investigation into, well, probably the biggest cyber criminal of the modern era. I'm talking about the Silk Road. You're probably imagining a dark room, right? Rows of FBI agents in windbreakers, glowing green code scrolling down these giant monitors, maybe a high-speed digital chase through encrypted servers.
The whole Hollywood setup.
Exactly. It's this cat-and-mouse game involving, sophisticated hacking, zero-day exploits, and state-of-the-art cyber warfare. That's the movie version. That is absolutely what we've been trained to expect.
It is the movie version. And, to be fair, there was plenty of technical complexity involved in the whole Silk Road saga. We really shouldn't discount that.
Okay.
There were servers to locate in foreign countries. You had encryption keys to break. And, a lot of very smart people were trying to hide very illegal things using technology that was, at the time, really cutting edge.
But and this is where it gets really interesting, that is not how the case was actually cracked. While all the cyber experts were banging their heads against firewalls, and, let's be honest, while some corrupt agents were busy skimming money off the top, which is a whole other story for another day,
A whole other deep dive, yeah.
the breakthrough didn't come from a hacker. It didn't come from a supercomputer.
No. It came from a tax investigator.
A tax guy. I mean, come on.
A tax investigator named Gary Alford. And the tool he used to unravel this massive dark web empire wasn't some piece of classified government spyware. It wasn't a warrant for a wiretap.
What was it?
It was the same tool you probably use to find a recipe for dinner or, settle a bet with a friend at a bar.
A Google.
Just Google.
That is just incredible. And that is the mission of today's deep dive. We are going to explore how one IRS agent, Gary Alford, pulled the single thread that unraveled the entire Silk Road. We're going to look at how a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise was brought down, not by breaking code, but by searching the clear net, a little bit of persistence, and one absolutely fatal amateur mistake.
It is a story about the central irony of the digital age, really. You can build the most sophisticated fortress in the world. You can wrap yourself in layers of Tor encryption and blockchain anonymity. But if you leave the back door unlocked in the very beginning,
none of that security matters.
none of it.
So set the scene for us. We're in the thick of the Silk Road investigation. This is around, 2013. What was the vibe inside the agencies at that time?
Chaos. Absolute chaos.
Really?
Yeah, you have to remember, at this point, the Silk Road is a global phenomenon. It wasn't just some website anymore. It was a cultural force. You have drugs moving through the mail, you have money moving through Bitcoin, and law enforcement is just scrambling.
Everyone wants a piece of the action.
Everyone wants a piece of this case. You have the FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security, all of them. But they were operating in silos. And frankly, there was just a lot of technical confusion. They were dealing with Tor, with cryptocurrency. I mean, things that at the time were baffling to traditional law enforcement.
Right. They were used to kicking down doors and following, bags of cash, not chasing ghosts through a router network.
Exactly. They were trying to apply 20th century policing methods to a 21st century problem. They were looking for a physical trail in a completely digital world. And amidst all these guys with guns and badges and warrants, you have Gary Alford.
Right. Gary Alford. He works for the IRS, specifically IRS criminal investigations. Now, usually when you think of the IRS in a criminal case, you think of audits. You think of getting that letter saying you messed up line 42 on your tax return.
And that's the civil side. IRS CI it's different. These are the heavy hitters. When you think of the IRS in this context, you should think Al Capone.
Oh, okay.
Think of catching people on the numbers when you can't catch them on the actual crimes.
The follow the money guys.
Exactly. But Alford was distinct even from the FBI cyber squads. He wasn't trying to hack the Silk Road servers. He wasn't trying to infiltrate the site undercover to buy heroin. He was looking at the problem through a completely different lens.
And what was that lens?
Human error. Alford had this core philosophy that drove his entire investigation, and it's something that sounds so simple but is actually quite profound.
Okay.
He believed everyone makes mistakes, especially in the beginning.
I love that. It's so human. It just cuts through all the tech hype and the mythos of the criminal mastermind.
It's a vital psychological insight. I mean, think about it. When you start any project, even a criminal one, you aren't an expert yet. You're learning as you go. You're experimenting. And usually when you launch something, what is your biggest problem?
Getting people to know about it.
Right. It's not hiding from the FBI. It's that nobody knows who you are.
You have no customer.
Exactly. You are desperate for attention. You want people to use your product. And that desperation combined with inexperience, it just leads to sloppiness. Alford bet that the mastermind behind Silk Road, this dread pirate Roberts, wasn't born a ghost. He bet that somewhere, way back in the early days, this person was just a guy trying to get a startup off the ground.
So while the FBI is trying to break down the front door of the fortress with these digital battering rams, Alfred decides to go look at the foundation that was poured years ago.
Precisely. And his work ethic was. It was relentless. We're talking about a guy who was working on weekends, sitting at his kitchen table, just digging and digging. And this brings us to his methodology. He explicitly ignored the dark web for this part of the hunt.
Ignored it. That seems completely counterintuitive. The crime is happening on the dark web.
For the purpose of finding the origin, yes. He didn't dive into the encrypted networks. He stayed on what's called the clear net.
Okay, just to clarify for everyone, because we throw these terms around, the clear net is just the internet, the normal internet.
It's the regular indexed internet. It's what you see when you use a standard search engine like Google or Bing. It's the surface web. Alfred's theory was that before the Silk Road went dark, it had to be announced somewhere visible.
Of course.
You can't have a marketplace with no customers. The founder had to recruit that first wave of buyers and sellers. And where do you do that?
On forums, in chat rooms, on the regular web where the people actually are.
Exactly. You go where your potential users are. So Alfred starts searching. He uses Google. He starts looking for the earliest mentions of Silk Road, combined with terms like Bitcoin or drugs or anonymous market. He's looking for the patient zero post, the very first time those words were spoken online.
It's just wild to think about. We assume these criminal masterminds are playing 4D chess, plotting 10 moves ahead, but Alfred is just playing checkers, hoping the other guy forgot a piece on the board 3 years ago.
And he did. He absolutely did.
Okay, so bring us to the discovery. This is the needle in the haystack moment. What did he find?
So it was a weekend. Alfred is digging through these archives of Bitcoin forums, and he finds a post from January 2011. Now, you have to keep in mind, this is very early in the timeline. Bitcoin itself was still incredibly niche.
This is the infancy of the Silk Road.
The very beginning, right. So he finds a post on a forum called bitcointalk.org, and the user's name is Altoid.
Altoid, like the mint.
Like the curiously strong mint.
Okay. And the post wasn't some grand manifesto, some declaration of a crypto-anarchist revolution.
Not at all. It was much, much more mundane.
What did it say?
I have the text here. Altoid wrote, "Has anyone seen Silk Road? It's kind of like an anonymous Amazon. I'm thinking of buying into it."
Has anyone seen Silk Road? I'm thinking of buying into it. Wow, that phrasing. It's so transparent.
What does that sound like to you?
That sounds like marketing. It sounds like one of those testimonials on an infomercial. I was skeptical at first, but this product changed my life.
It is classic
What?
shilling, or what we would now call astroturfing.
It's like when an author goes on Amazon and writes a fake 5-star review for their own book. Wow, just read this book. It changed my life. You guys should check it out.
That's the perfect analogy. It's a sock puppet account.
Yeah.
Altoid wasn't asking a genuine question. He was trying to generate buzz. He was planting the seed. He was dropping the name Silk Road into a community of early Bitcoin enthusiasts to see if anyone would bite.
And that line, it's kind of like an anonymous Amazon. That is such a distinct pitch. That's the elevator pitch you give to investors.
It is. And it reveals that desperation we talked about earlier. This wasn't a mysterious, untouchable drug lord yet. This was a startup founder trying to get his user acquisition numbers up.
He needed traffic.
He needed traffic, and in his eagerness to get that traffic, he left a permanent searchable record on the ClearNet.
So Alfred finds this Altoid character, and naturally he thinks, okay, who is this guy?
Right. This is the first breadcrumb.
Mm-hmm.
But a username on a forum isn't an ID. Altoid could be anyone. It could be a random user who really did just stumble upon the site and was curious. So Alfred keeps digging.
He doesn't stop.
He tracks Altoid's activity over the next few months. He follows the digital trail of this specific user, looking at every single post they ever made.
And this is where the everyone makes mistakes theory really pays off.
Big time. About 10 months later, that's October 2011, Altoid is back on the forums. But now, the tone has changed slightly. The Silk Road is running, but they need help. The technical demands are growing. The infrastructure is straining under the weight of all the users he successfully recruited.
So what does he do?
Altoid posts a job offering.
A help wanted ad. For a criminal enterprise? On a public forum?
Essentially, yes. He was looking for an IT expert in the Bitcoin community, someone who understood the code structure. He posts this job description asking for developers. And at the very end of the post, he tells interested candidates how to contact him.
Oh no, please tell me he didn't. This is the moment where you scream at the horror movie screen, don't go in the basement.
He went straight into the basement. He wrote, "Email me at..."
Don't say it, I can't, I almost don't want to hear it.
RussUlbricht@gmail.com.
No.
Yes.
Get out of here. RussUlbricht@gmail.com. His real name. His actual full name.
His real legal name. In a Gmail address.
I have to pause here for a second. We are talking about the Dread Pirate Roberts. The guy running a multi-million-dollar international narcotics market. The guy who allegedly ordered hits on people, and he used his Gmail.
It is hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just defies every expectation we have of a criminal mastermind. It's almost comical.
It's unbelievable.
Yep.
Why would he do that? What was he thinking?
Let's try to analyze it. It connects right back to Alfred's theory of the beginner's mind. Think about the timeline. This post was late 2011. The Silk Road was growing, sure, But maybe Ross didn't realize just how big it was going to get.
Right.
He wasn't fully the Dread Pirate Roberts in his own mind yet. He was still Ross, the guy trying to fix a server issue.
But still, to use your real name, that's not just a small slip-up.
It was likely a moment of, well, of convenience. He probably had that email address auto-filled in his browser. He was typing out a post. He needed a contact method, and he just topped it. It was muscle memory.
It is a reflex, an automatic
A
reflex.
fatal reflex. And here's the thing about the internet. He likely realized the mistake. He might have even gone back and edited the post later to remove it or change it to his secure address. But on the internet, nothing is ever truly deleted.
The archives.
The archives. Someone had quoted him in a reply. Or a web scraper like the Wayback Machine had already scraped the page. The breadcrumb was petrified in digital stone. Forever.
So Gary Alford, sitting there at his kitchen table on a weekend, probably spitting out his coffee, sees this email address, rossulbricht@gmail.com. The mask is off.
The mask is completely off. But, and this is critical, Alfred is a professional. He knows that seeing a name in a forum post isn't proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
It's true, yeah.
Anyone could type email me at someone else's name just to frame them.
So he can't just call the FBI and say, I got him, based on one forum post.
Yeah. No. He has to confirm it. He has to build a profile. He needs to connect the digital persona to the physical person. So Alfred takes the name Ross Ulbricht and runs it through standard searches.
Back to Google, his favorite tool.
Back to Google. And the profile that starts to emerge matches up. Well, it matches up perfectly.
What does he find?
He finds Ross's social media presence. He finds his LinkedIn, his Facebook. He finds a digital footprint of a real person living in the world. And he starts looking at Ross's interests. Specifically, he looks at his YouTube favorites and the essays he had posted on LinkedIn.
And what is on the playlist? What's he into?
Austrian economics.
Austrian economics. Okay, for those of us who might have skipped Econ 101, why does that matter? Why is that a red flag?
Well, Austrian economics is a school of thought. You're talking about thinkers like Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard, that strongly emphasizes radical free markets, individualism, and a complete lack of government intervention.
Yep.
It is the intellectual bedrock of modern libertarianism. Now, if you looked at the philosophical manifesto of the Silk Road, the things that Dread Pirate Roberts was posting on the site itself, it was pure Austrian economics.
So the ideology is a perfect match.
Perfect match. DPR wasn't just selling drugs. He was preaching a philosophy. He was writing these long essays about how the state has no right to control what you put in your body. And here is Ross Ulbricht, a young guy preaching the exact same philosophy on his public social media. The voice was identical.
And you mentioned his location earlier. That's another dot that got connected, right?
A huge dot, a critical one.
Yeah.
The FBI had already determined, through IP address analysis and other surveillance, that DPR was likely operating out of San Francisco. They knew he was in that specific time zone, accessing the internet from that specific city.
And lo and behold, Ross Ulbricht
is living in San Francisco.
Wow.
And not just in the city. When they pinpointed his address, he was living just blocks away from internet cafes and other locations where DPR was known to be connecting to the internet.
It's almost too perfect. You have the name, the email, the philosophy, the location. It's a royal flush. It's everything.
It is. So Alfred compiles all of this. He puts together a meticulous report. He has the Altoid posts, the Gmail slip-up, the social media matches, the geographical proximity, and he takes it all to the FBI.
And this is the part that drives me crazy. You'd think the FBI would, I don't know, throw him a parade, name a building after him.
You would think. But remember the context we started with. The FBI had task forces dedicated to this case. They were hunting a ghost. They had built up this image of DPR as a supervillain, maybe a cartel operative, maybe a whole team of elite Russian hackers.
Right.
So when a tax investigator walks in and says, hey, I found him on Google. His name is Ross. He's a 20-something hipster living in San Francisco. There was institutional pushback.
They were skeptical.
Highly skeptical. It seemed too simple. They struggled to accept that the answer had been sitting in a Gmail address on a public forum for 2 years. They wanted a complex solution to what they saw as a complex problem.
It's a cognitive bias, right? We expect the solution to match the magnitude of the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A billion-dollar crime needs a billion-dollar investigation, not a simple Google search.
Yeah.
But facts are facts. Alfred pushed, he was persistent, and eventually they had to test the theory. And this brings us to the final puzzle piece, the smoking gun that moved this from a strong theory to a confirmed identity.
The Iceland server.
Correct. Earlier in the investigation, the authorities had managed to locate an image A Silk Road server in Iceland. This was a massive technical win for them, probably the only part of the story that actually fits the Hollywood version.
Okay.
On that server, buried in the data, they found a photo.
A photo of what?
It was a fake ID, a counterfeit driver's license with a photo of the Silk Road administrator, but with a different name. It was clearly used for some kind of verification or some operational necessity where you needed to appear legitimate.
Okay, so they have a face. They have a picture of the guy.
They have a face. So once Alfred gives them the name Ross Ulbricht, it's a very simple next step. They pull Ross's actual legal driver's license from the DMV database, and they hold them up side by side. The fake ID from the secret server in Iceland and the real ID of the guy who posted his Gmail address on a forum years before.
It was him.
It was a perfect match. The puzzle was complete. They knew who he was. And in that moment, the entire investigation immediately shifted gears. It wasn't who is DPR anymore. It was how do we catch Ross Ulbricht with his laptop open so he can't encrypt the evidence.
That is just staggering. When you really step back and look at the whole arc of it.
It completely redefines the whole case. It shifts the narrative from a story about technology to a story about psychology and human error.
It really does. I mean, we started this deep dive talking about the myth of the high-tech wizard. And look, sure, Ross Ulbricht was smart. He built something massive and complex. But in the end, he wasn't taken down by a better coder.
No.
He was taken down because he wanted to shill his startup in 2011 and got sloppy for 5 minutes.
And because he made a mistake that thousands of people make every single day, mixing up their personal and professional identities online. He violated the most basic #1 rule of OPSEC, or operational security, which is compartmentalization.
You never let the streams cross.
You never ever let the streams cross.
It's the ultimate irony. This whole digital anonymous empire fell because of a forum post and a personal email address.
And let's not forget the role of Gary Alford in all this. In a world of specialists, you had cybersecurity experts, narcotics agents, undercover operatives. It was the generalist, the tax agent with a hunch and a search bar who saw what everyone else missed.
Because he looked where others weren't looking.
He looked at the past.
He didn't look at the sophisticated, encrypted traffic of 2013. He looked at the messy, amateurish beginnings of 2011.
He understood that everyone comes from somewhere. Even a dread pirate Roberts starts as a guy named Altoid asking for help on a forum.
It's a story about persistence. It's a story about attention to detail. But I think mostly it's a story about how fragile our digital anonymity really is.
That's the big takeaway for me. We think of the internet as this vast, fleeting ocean of information. We post things and we think they just wash away with the tide.
Yeah.
But it's not fleeting. It's a library where nothing is ever thrown away.
Which brings us to a thought I really want to leave you, the listener, with today. We all leave these breadcrumbs. Maybe you aren't running a criminal empire, and I certainly hope you aren't. But think about the digital footprints you're creating right now. Think about that forum post from 10 years ago, that tweet you made in college, that email address you used on some random site you've completely forgot about.
If a mastermind who is obsessed with security, someone who literally dedicated his life to privacy, can be undone by a single post from years ago, what does that say about the rest of us?
Exactly. What permanent records are we creating today that might define us or maybe even incriminate us years down the line? It makes you want to go clear your history, doesn't it?
It certainly makes you think twice before hitting post.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.
Stay curious. Okay, let's unpack this. Picture the scene with me. It is October 1st, 2013, a Tuesday. A beautiful, crisp autumn day in San Francisco. And you walk into the Glen Park Public Library. Now, if you've never been there, just imagine a totally mundane, quiet community space.
Right. You have the smell of old paper, the hushed sound of people flipping pages, maybe the low hum of the ventilation system.
Exactly. It's the kind of place where people go to escape the noise of the city, maybe apply for jobs, or just browse the internet for free. It is the absolute epitome of normal.
It creates such a specific mental image, doesn't it? The ultimate symbol of public tranquility, a sanctuary of silence where, the biggest drama is usually an overdue book fee.
Totally. And sitting there, sort of tucked away in a corner, is a young guy. He looks like any other tech-focused millennial you'd see in the Bay Area.
T-shirt, jeans, probably.
Yeah, exactly. He's got his laptop open at Samsung 700Z, and he is just laser-focused on a screen. To anyone walking by, he's probably working on a startup, maybe finishing a term paper, or just scrolling Reddit.
But in reality, this quiet public library is, at that very moment, acting as the command center for the most notorious digital black market in history.
And that brings us to the mission of this deep dive. Today, we aren't just talking about the rise of the Silk Road. We are unpacking the finale, the end game.
We are going to reconstruct, minute by minute, the high-stakes arrest of Ross Ulbricht. Because when you look at the details, this was a truly pivotal moment in the history of cybercrime.
And let me tell you, looking at the source material, this isn't just a police procedural. This is some spy novel stuff.
It really is.
We're going to look at the specific, almost theatrical tactics the FBI had to use to bypass military-grade encryption. It wasn't about guns. It was all about timing and psychology.
And we won't stop at the arrest. We need to follow this all the way through to the courtroom. We're going to analyze the fall guy defense strategy, which was actually incredibly clever, the overwhelming evidence found on that laptop, and finally, the verdict. 2 life sentences plus 40 years.
It is a staggering sentence. I mean, when I first read that, I had to double-check the numbers. It sounds like something you'd get for being a warlord, not, a web developer.
It is, and it raises some really profound philosophical questions about justice in the digital age. Does the punishment fit the crime? And perhaps more importantly, did making an example of this one man actually stop the machine he built?
So let's jump in. We've got the timeline, we've got the court documents, and we've got the accounts of the agents on the ground. Let's go back to that library.
Right. So the setting is absolutely crucial here. The Glen Park Library wasn't a random choice. Ross Ulbricht, the alleged mastermind behind the Silk Road, was a creature of habit.
That's the thing about humans, right? Even the ones running international cybercriminal empires have routines. They need coffee, they need Wi-Fi, they need to get out of the house.
Precisely. The FBI had been tracking his movements for some time. They knew he lived nearby in a shared house, but they also knew he preferred working out of the house.
And he liked the library specifically for its free Wi-Fi.
He did. It offered a degree of anonymity, or so he thought. He didn't have to register an account to use it. He could just sit down and connect. Plus, I think it prevented him from going stir-crazy in his apartment.
I love the detail of where exactly he was sitting. According to the surveillance reports, he had set up camp in the science fiction section.
You really can't write irony like that. I mean, if you put that in a movie script, the producers would tell you it's too on the nose.
You really can't. Here is the guy who built a real-life digital dystopia, a hidden marketplace accessed through the Tor network, using cryptocurrency to sell drugs and illicit goods anonymously. And he's caught sitting next to, I don't know, copies of Neuromancer or Snow Crash.
It fits perfectly. The whole concept of the Silk Road was born out of these libertarian science fiction ideals, a stateless market, a place where technology circumvented government control. Ross absolutely viewed himself as a pioneer, almost a fictional hero in his own mind.
But let's look at the tactical situation the agents were facing. This wasn't a situation where they could just kick down the door and yell, "Freeze."
Not at all.
Why not? I mean, they had him. He's sitting right there in a chair. He's not going anywhere. If you swarm him with 6 agents, he's in custody. Job done, right?
Well, if the goal was just to arrest Ross Ulbricht, the human being, sure. But in the world of cybercrime, physical custody of the suspect is only half the battle. In fact, it's often the less important half.
The real target wasn't Ross.
No, the target was the data on his laptop.
This is the kill switch problem we read about in the source material. Can you break that down for us? Why is the laptop such a fortress?
Okay, let's imagine a bank vault. When the door is open, you can see the money, you can grab the ledgers, you have access. But this particular bank vault has a mechanism where if you try to shut the door, or if the power is cut, or if a panic button is hit, the door just slams shut, locks, and simultaneously scrambles the combination.
So once it shuts, it's over. You're locked out for good.
Essentially, Ross was smart. He knew the risks. His laptop was fully encrypted. We're talking full disk encryption.
And for those of us who aren't cybersecurity experts, what does that actually mean in practice?
It means that every single bit of data on the hard drive is scrambled into unreadable nonsense code. The only time that data is readable decrypted is when the user types in their password.
Oh, okay.
This decryption key is stored temporarily in the computer's RAM. It's short-term memory, but only while the computer is on and the user is logged in.
So while he's sitting there typing in the sci-fi section, the vault is open. The key is in the RAM.
Exactly. But if he had even a second of warning, if he saw a badge, if someone shouted FBI, or if he just got spooked, all he had to do was slam the laptop lid shut.
And if he closes the lid?
The computer goes to sleep or shuts down. The encryption key is flushed from the RAM, it vanishes, it's gone forever, the hard drive locks instantly, it becomes a brick. A very expensive, unreadable brick.
And without that key, the FBI can't get in, even with all their supercomputers and everything.
It would take decades, maybe centuries, to brute force that kind of modern encryption. Without that open session, the FBI might have had Ross, but they wouldn't have Dread Pirate Roberts.
Right. They wouldn't have the definitive proof linking the man to the digital persona.
Potentially, yes. It would have made the case infinitely harder to prove. They could prove he was Ross Ulbricht. They could maybe prove he used Tor. But could they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was the sole administrator of the Silk Road? Maybe not. He could claim he was just a user or that he was doing research.
So the laptop closing means the evidence vanishes. It's game over for the prosecution.
That was the risk. So the agents in that library, these plainclothes FBI agents pretending to be browsing for books, were facing this massive dilemma. They had to get the laptop while it was still open and while he was authenticated into the site.
This brings us to where it gets really, really interesting. The choreography of this arrest. It wasn't brute force at all. It was misdirection. It was practically a magic trick.
It really was. They needed a distraction. Something that would trigger a deeply ingrained human reflex.
What do you mean?
You can train yourself to be a master criminal. You can learn about operational security. You can use VPNs and Tor, but you can't easily train yourself out of basic human curiosity.
So paint the picture for us. Ross is typing away. He's probably monitoring the site, maybe checking support tickets or escrow payments. What happens next?
The team is in position. You have agents blending in, looking at shelves. Then 2 agents, a male and a female, are positioned just behind him. And they start a staged argument.
A lover's quarrel. In a library.
Essentially, they start bickering. Why did you say that? I didn't say that. It starts low and gets a little louder. Now you have to think about the environment. In a library, silence is the social contract. When that contract is broken, it is incredibly disruptive. It's socially awkward.
Right. If someone starts shouting in a library, everyone looks. It's just instinct. You want to identify the threat or just see the drama, you can't help it.
Exactly, and that's what they were banking on. They needed Ross to take his eyes off the screen and his hands off the keyboard just for a split second.
So the argument gets louder.
It peaks, and Ross does what almost anyone would do. He turns his head. He looks over his shoulder to see what the commotion is about.
And that is the critical moment. The window of opportunity.
That is the window. As soon as his head turns, a third agent, Agent Thomas Kiernan, who had been waiting in the wings, doesn't go for Ross. He swoops in and snatches the laptop right off the table.
I can just imagine the adrenaline in that split second. It's a pure snatch and grab.
It had to be terrifyingly fast. And the source material describes Ross's reaction. He didn't try to run. He didn't try to pull a gun or fight the agents physically. He lunged for the computer.
He knew. Instantly.
He knew exactly what was happening. He tried to grab it back, presumably to shut it down or smash it, but he was too late. The agent had the laptop, and crucially, the agent kept the lid open.
Oh, he didn't close it.
No, he immediately moved it away from Ross, handing it off to a technical expert, Agent Tom Tarbell, who was ready to keep that session alive at all costs.
They had to keep moving the mouse, right?
Yeah.
To stop the screensaver from coming on or the computer from locking?
Literally, yes. Keep the mouse moving. They had to photograph the screen immediately. They even plugged in a mouse jiggler, which is a USB device that just tricks the computer into thinking the user is active, preventing it from going to sleep.
So they preserved the state of that machine.
At all costs.
And what they found on that screen, I mean, talk about a smoking gun. In most crimes, a smoking gun is a figure of speech. Here, it was literal, digital proof right there.
It was the mastermind console. When they looked at the screen, Ross wasn't just checking his email or reading the news. He was logged into the Silk Road administration panel. The code name for the page was literally Mastermind.
No way.
And he was logged in specifically as the user Dread Pirate Roberts.
And the chat windows were open, right? He was in the middle of a conversation.
Active chat windows. He was in the middle of a conversation with one of his employees, a user named Cirrus. Ironically, Cirrus was actually an undercover agent who was deliberately stalling him online to keep him logged in while the physical team moved in.
Wow. So he was being pinned down from both the digital side and the physical side simultaneously. A complete pincer movement.
Absolutely. On the screen, they saw spreadsheets. They saw the flagged messages. It was the digital equivalent of catching a cartel boss sitting at a desk with piles of cocaine and a ledger open in front of him, pen in hand.
That moment, it completely stripped away any deniability. If they had arrested him at home while he was sleeping, or if he had managed to close that laptop, he could have said, I don't know who Dread Pirate Roberts is, I just run the servers.
Or that someone else had access.
Right. But here, he is the one driving the bus. He's caught with his hands on the digital steering wheel.
Precisely. It connected the physical person, Ross Ulbricht, to the digital pseudonym, Dread Pirate Roberts, in a way that was legally irrefutable. And that successful snatch maneuver defined everything that came after it. It defined the trial, and it certainly defined the sentence.
So let's move to the trial. Because despite being caught so red-handed, or I guess red laptops, Ross didn't plead guilty. He fought this.
They did.
And looking at the legal strategy, it was actually kind of a Hail Mary, but a fascinating one.
It was. The trial was high profile, and the defense strategy was, well, desperate is one word, but creative is another. They couldn't deny that Ross started the Silk Road. The digital trail for the creation of the site went back way too far. His old forum posts, his coding history, it was all there.
So they had to admit he built it.
Yes. They admitted he created the site as an economic experiment, a libertarian playground. He was idealistic, he wanted a free market, but, and here's the big pivot, they claimed he had handed it off to someone else years ago.
The fall guy narrative.
Exactly. The argument was that the Silk Road became too stressful, too dangerous, so Ross sold it or gave it away. They argued that the Dread Pirate Roberts name was just a title.
Like in the movie The Princess Bride.
Exactly like that. In the movie, the Dread Pirate Roberts isn't one man. It's a mantle passed down from captain to captain. The defense argued that the real criminal mastermind was someone else. Maybe Mark Karpeles, the guy who ran the Bitcoin exchange Mt. Gox, or some other shadowy figure, and that Rams had been lured back in at the last minute to take the fall.
So the theory was, Ross builds it, leaves, and then the real Dread Pirate Roberts sets him up to be sitting in that library with the laptop at the exact moment the feds arrive.
That was the story they tried to tell. They tried to paint him as a naive programmer who lost control of his creation and was being framed by the real criminals who were still out there in the shadows. I'm not the drug lord, I'm just the patsy.
But the laptop?
Yeah.
That must have been a huge problem for that story.
The laptop destroyed that narrative. This is where the library raid paid off in court. Because the agents kept that computer open, they had access to everything on the hard drive. And Ross, it turns out, was a meticulous record keeper.
What kind of stuff are we talking about here? Was it just transaction logs and business records?
Yeah. Oh, no. So much more. It was deeply personal. He kept diaries, detailed journals, where he wrote about his thoughts, his anxieties, his decisions regarding the site. He documented the growth of the business. He had spreadsheets tracking profits to the penny.
Why would you do that? If you were running a massive criminal enterprise, why write it all down? That seems like Criminal 101. Don't leave a paper trail.
Yeah.
Or a digital one.
That's a question for the psychologists, I think. Maybe it was ego. Maybe he wanted to write a memoir one day. Maybe he just needed to organize his thoughts because he couldn't talk to anyone else about this life he was leading. It's lonely at the top, right?
I suppose.
But those journals didn't stop years ago when he allegedly handed off the site. They went right up to the present day.
So the timeline in the journals completely contradicted the defense's story.
Completely.
Mm-hmm.
There were entries from just weeks before the arrest where he's discussing specific personnel issues, coding updates he was working on, and decisions about site policies. He wrote about the stress of managing the servers during storms. He wrote about the fear of being caught.
And the chat logs, what do they show?
The chat logs confirmed he was micromanaging every single aspect of it. He wasn't a retired founder. He was the CEO, the CFO, and the HR department all rolled into one.
Wow.
He was mediating disputes between drug dealers. He was dealing with hackers. And the evidence showed he was even involved in commissioning violent acts to protect the operation.
Right, the murder for hire allegations. That's a whole other dark layer to this.
It is. And while those specific charges were not the main focus of this particular trial's verdict, they were part of the evidence demonstrating his ongoing control and his mindset. The logs showed a man who was willing to use violence, or at least pay for it, to protect his empire.
That doesn't fit the naive programmer narrative at all.
Not even close. It showed a hardening of his character over time. The jury didn't buy the Fall Guy story for a second. The evidence was simply overwhelming.
And that leads us to 2015, the conviction.
Convicted on all counts. Conspiracy to commit narcotics trafficking, money laundering, computer hacking. The list was extensive. But the real shockwave came with the sentencing.
Judge Catherine Forrest.
Yes, and this is where the story shifts from a crime thriller to a tragedy or a debate on justice, depending on your perspective. The sentencing guidelines were harsh, but Judge Forrest still had discretion. She could have been lenient. She was not.
2 life sentences, plus 40 years,
Yeah.
without the possibility of parole.
It is a sentence that essentially says, you will die in a concrete box. There is no light at the end of the tunnel. It's not 25 to life. It is life, period.
And she was very explicit about why she did it. This wasn't just about what Ross did.
No, not at all. She stated clearly that the sentence was designed to send a message. She wanted to deter anyone else who was thinking about stepping into his shoes. She wanted to signal to the entire dark web that the anonymity of the internet would not protect you from the full weight of the United States government.
She also pointed to his background, didn't she?
She did. She specifically noted that Ross was an educated, privileged person who chose to violate the law, which in her eyes made him more culpable, not less.
So what does this all mean? We have a young man, a first-time offender technically, receiving a sentence often reserved for violent cartel leaders or terrorists.
This is where we have to pause and look at the bigger picture. This raises a really important question about proportionality.
Right. I mean, murderers sometimes get out in 25 years. Ross Ulbricht never touched the drugs. He never personally delivered a package. He wrote code. He built a website.
That is the core of the debate. Supporters of Ross, and there is a massive Free Ross movement, argue that he was a facilitator, not a drug lord. They even argue that the Silk Road actually reduced violence in the drug trade.
How so? What's the logic there?
By taking it off the streets. If you buy drugs on the Silk Road, you aren't meeting a dealer in a dark alley. You aren't getting robbed. The quality is verified by user reviews like Yelp for heroin, so overdoses from bad batches theoretically go down.
Like an Amazon for illicit goods, with customer feedback.
Exactly. The argument from his supporters is that double life plus 40 is grotesquely disproportionate for a non-violent crime involving a website. They see him as a political prisoner, punished for embarrassing the government.
But then you have the other side of that coin.
The prosecution, and obviously the judge, saw it very differently. To them, Ross wasn't just a coder. He was the enabler of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, of drug deals.
He made heroin, cocaine, and meth accessible to anyone with an internet connection.
Right, including teenagers in their bedrooms. They argued that because he built the marketplace and took a commission on every single sale, he was directly responsible for every overdose and every addiction that resulted from it.
It's the difference between the landlord and the drug dealer, isn't it? Is the landlord responsible for what happens in the apartment? The court said yes, if the landlord built the apartment building specifically for dealing drugs and takes a cut of the profits.
That's a perfect analogy. But let's look at the effectiveness of this message. Judge Forrest wanted to stop the dark web. She wanted to scare people straight.
Did it work?
If we look at the data, no, not at all. This is the Hydra effect.
You cut off one head, 2 more grow in its place.
Precisely. The Silk Road is gone. But the digital black market didn't die with it. In fact, our sources indicate that the online illicit market has grown larger than ever since his arrest.
That is wild. You'd think seeing someone get double life without parole would make people pause.
It might make them more careful. It might make them improve their operational security. It certainly taught everyone a very hard lesson about encrypting their laptops.
Sure.
But the demand is there, and the technology is there. The arrest of Ross Ulbricht proved one very specific thing. You can arrest the man. You can put Ross Ulbricht in a cage for the rest of his natural life, but you cannot arrest the code.
The code is out there. The genie is out of the bottle.
The underlying technology, Tor, Bitcoin, PGP encryption, it's all neutral. It doesn't care about laws. And as long as there's a market for these goods, someone will spin up a server. We've seen Silk Road 2.0, Alphabet, Hansa. They keep coming. They get taken down, and a week later, another one pops up.
So Ross is essentially paying the price for a phenomenon that is much, much bigger than him.
In many ways, yes. He became the symbol, the sacrificial lamb, if you will, for the government's war on cybercrime. He is currently sitting in a maximum security prison. His life, for all intents and purposes, ended in that library when he was 29 years old.
It's chilling to think about that contrast.
It is. You have the permanence of his incarceration, static, unchanging, finalized. He's watching his 30s, 40s, and eventually his old age tick by in a cell. And outside the walls, the digital world he helped pioneer is moving faster than ever, evolving, expanding, totally indifferent to his fate.
It really makes you wonder about the definition of justice in a case like this.
It does. Is justice about retribution? Is it about deterrence? And if the deterrence doesn't actually work, if the crime continues to grow despite the punishment, then what was the point of the severity?
It feels like a tragedy all around. A tragedy for the lives lost to drugs, of course. It's also a tragedy of wasted potential. Ross was obviously brilliant.
Undeniably. He built something that changed the world, for better or for worse. He solved the trust problem among anonymous criminals, which is a massive game theory accomplishment. It's a classic cautionary tale of intelligence without wisdom, or perhaps idealism without a moral compass.
So to recap the journey we've been on today, we started in the science fiction section of the Glen Park Public Library.
A quiet Tuesday afternoon, disrupted by a staged lover's quarrel. Just incredible.
We watched as the FBI executed a perfect sleight-of-hand maneuver, a fake argument, a turned head, and a snatched laptop to bypass military-grade encryption.
The open lid move that preserved the evidence and completely sealed Ross's fate.
We saw how that open laptop dismantled the Fall Guy defense, revealing the diaries and chat logs of the Dread Pirate Roberts, proving he was the captain of the ship until the very end.
Leading to a conviction and a sentence meant to shake the very foundations of the dark web. 2 life terms plus 40 years.
And finally, we're left looking at the legacy. A man in a cell and a digital black market that has only grown stronger and larger in his absence.
It leaves us with a very uncomfortable reality to face.
It certainly does. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
What's on your mind?
We've talked about the message the court tried to send. But think about this. If the goal of the justice system was to stop the dark web, and the dark web is now bigger than ever, was the sacrifice of Ross Ulbricht's entire life a successful act of justice? Or was it just a futile attempt by an analog legal system to control a digital technology it can't actually stop?
That is the question, isn't it? And I think the answer depends entirely on what you think prison is for.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.